They wanna give him 109 for following the legal line. Bitcoin Jesus paid his dues, now they tryna make him lose. Free fear, can't silence the truth. Free fear, breaking their own rules. Free fear, from prison to Spain, now they're doing it again. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol. Government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead, using compliance plans instead, yeah. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol. Government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead, using compliance plans instead, yeah. Free fear. Free fear. Blockstream got the way back then. 1 meg blocks, remember when? Big blocks meant decentralized. Small blocks kept us paralyzed. Now they're coming for the king, using laws like puppet strings. Spanish prison, McAfee died, making sure Veer stays inside. They can raid the lawyers, what? They can seize the files, yeah. But they can't stop crypto, nah. Running wild, running wild. Brownstone dropping truth bombs daily. System going crazy lately. Trying to lock up Bitcoin Jesus, but they cannot defeat us. Fear saw freedom in the code, now they wanna block his road. But the movement's too damn strong, and this persecution's wrong. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Down on 9 years for following legal advice. That's not justice, that's a warning. Free Roger Ver.
From Silicon Valley to the Spanish shore, fighting for freedom, but they want something more. 10 months in prison just for speaking his mind. Now they're coming back trying to leave him behind. 109 years for following the law. Most corrupt case that you ever saw. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free Roger now. Hired the best lawyers, did everything right. Still they raided offices in the dead of night. Used his own compliance as evidence of guilt. Now his freedom hangs on the empire they built. Speaking truth to power comes with a price, but we won't let them sacrifice. Oh, they can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free Roger Ver. unfold. They can't silence the truth, they can't chain what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger, free, free Roger now.
Welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is season 2, episode 7. And today we're going to be launching what's going to be at least 7 days in a row, possibly a lot more, of a daily podcast to both highlight Roger's situation and then also to explore other topics in the context of a fast. And so tonight is going to be an overview of this entire process. And I hope if you're new to fasting, you don't have to fast to participate in this, but I highly recommend fasting in general. And I'll actually talk about my experiences with that as we go through the presentation this evening. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to ask questions. I prefer these things to be interactive. I actually like in person even more than online, and online more than canned. So if you do have any questions throughout, please feel free to chime in. I'm going to give you an update on just kind of where we are and kind of the severity of the situation. So basically, Roger is still facing 109 years in prison. He has been stuck in Spain now for 337 days awaiting extradition. That extradition could happen literally at any point in time. And so today, just for the scoreboard, is day 1 of the fast. I stopped eating last night at 7:30, so it's been a little bit over 24 hours. So I've actually completed the first day of the fast. And again, if you want to participate in this, I don't expect everyone or anyone to do 7 or more days. The longest fast I've ever done is 38 days in a row, and I will go into more detail on that. So if you want to, chime in at any point, you don't have to start today. You can start later on in the process. It doesn't matter. Or not start at all and just share the content and watch the content. But I think fasting is very powerful for political activism, but it's also powerful for personal transformation. And it's something that's been very important to me since about 2019. And it's something that I've wanted to actually share with others and haven't really known. I mean, I've tweeted about it from time to time, but I kind of want to walk through what I've learned fasting well over 200 days, just about the impact that it has just physically as well as emotionally, mentally, and spiritually in a variety of other manners. So I want to start off by saying that this fast is a personal effort. This is not in any way associated with the Free Roger Now campaign. I haven't talked to Roger about this. I mean, Roger probably knows that I'm doing it because he's probably seen it on social media, but I am not doing it on his behalf or with his permission or input or anything like that. I'm doing this of my own volition, specifically because, I'm concerned about the fact that his situation remains ongoing. I mean, we're seeing other people get pardoned. We're seeing, everything from meme coins to people who actually engaged in activity where theft was involved, receiving pardons. And Roger's case continues to be delayed or in this suspended state while, he awaits every day the threat of extradition. And so I think it's incredibly important that we elevate this situation as much as we possibly can, because what I'm concerned about is we're approaching, I think the end of next month is Trump's first 100 days in office. And I feel like, the further away we drift from that first 100 days, the less likely something is to happen, just because this is generally what happens with administrations, and people already start planning on and working on midterms. And so then all of a sudden, whatever political capital you have in that first 100 days. So it's important for us to to elevate this particular case before then. I'm going to walk through the agenda today, and this is actually a similar structure to what I'm going to be doing every day. It's going to follow something similar to this. And I will say, I ask you if you would like and share this this live stream now. I can see that the numbers are already, are pretty low to start. I have been severely shadow banned, and because this is actually going out on more than one channel. It's going out on my X, it's going out on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Rumble, YouTube. And so, to be at this number, recently I've been kind of averaging 3,000 views. So any amplification efforts would be greatly appreciated. And I've seen this overall in aggregate with my traffic stats. So please do share this important message. But in general, the format is going to be, I'm going to talk about upcoming events and then a recap of the previous episode, talk about why I'm fasting. I'm going to provide an overview of fasting itself and what it's all about. Many people are not familiar with it. In fact, modern medicine, it isn't even included in the curriculum. It's not something that people even consider. A lot of people, in fact, the idea of not eating for an entire day, people feel like they might actually die if they don't eat for a day. That's how unfamiliar the concept is for a lot of people. I'm going to talk about today's Roger focused topic. Then I'm going to talk about today's other topic. So as I do these podcasts every day, part of it is going to be about Roger and his situation. And then, the other part of it is going to be, I'm going to continue to develop a lot of other content just related to CBDC's Technocracy and my normal type of content. This will be a heavy content production period. And as I discussed, when you get into a fast, you end up with incredible amounts of mental energy and clarity. At least that's been my experience so far. So I'm expecting to produce quite a bit of content over the next, however long this is, 7 days to, who knows, maybe I'll shoot for 40 days again. I'm going to talk about with each day, what are some action steps that can be taken. I'm going to provide references and then talk about the next day's topics. And then at the end, I'm going to open it up to kind of a roundtable and Q&A. And so you're welcome to, either submit questions or, through the chat, or actually, if you've been following my podcast, actually have a couple people come on and just have a conversation, whether it's to share your personal stories about Roger or comment on the particular topic of the day or ask questions or even share your own experiences with fasting. All of that's actually great content. And then what I actually will do is I create AI clips from the content in shorter format, and then I share it out over all my socials. And so those kinds of interactions can be incredibly valuable because there are a lot of questions or comments that people have that are generally of interest to the broader public. Just as a refresher from the last podcast that I did, a week or so ago, it's a very important topic. It's this idea that stable coins are backdoor CBDCs. I think that because of the election and Trump coming out and saying he's against CBDCs, people have become complacent. In reality, we are on a hyper accelerated time horizon for getting programmable digital currency, or even more programmable digital currency. And I go into great detail, not only in that episode, but in my Brownstone article, which was published after I did that episode. So you can go to either daylightfreedom.org or you can go to brownstone.org and you can see that article. And the article is called The Stablecoin Trap, the Back Door to Total Financial Control. So this is a pretty lengthy article, but that lays out exactly what's going on in terms of the legislation in Congress. There's a stable bill in the House. There's something called the Genius Bill in the Senate. And these bills basically give control over the issuance of stable coins to large, heavily regulated financial organizations and banks in the United States. And it's heavy on surveillance, heavy on know your customer. And what's different with the stablecoin approach versus what Biden was trying to do is Biden was incompetent. The Trump administration and the people surrounding Trump, people from the PayPal mafia, people like Elon Musk, David Sachs, Peter Thiel, and others actually are very capable of fully rolling something like this out. And in fact, they're pretty far along in the process. And some of this stuff has been in the works for years. So I encourage you to read the article, watch the video, and share this content, because I mean, I've been giving talks all over the place and no one is aware of this. This is truly on no one's radar. I want to say this. I just got back from New York over the weekend, where I had the opportunity to speak at the Summit for Truth and Wellness event. This is an event that Shannon Joy helped put together, and this is I think the third event that they've had. I actually attended as a guest, not a speaker, a couple of years ago. This is a really phenomenal event. There were probably, I don't know, close to 500 people there live. And it was also live streamed. And I think at one point there were 6,000 people watching the live stream live. And you know, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions more, that will watch after the fact. And so I was really honored to be able to participate in this, because the typical focus has been, you know, and truth and wellness, it's been more healthcare focused. A lot of it's been more COVID focused. And you can see from Dr. Pierre Corey, Mary Taylor Bowden, Naomi Wolf, Mary Holland, and others. I mean, this is kind of an all-star panel of people focusing on COVID tyranny, vaccination, and everything else. But there was a Technocracy panel that I was on, which was actually the big panel in the morning. So a couple hour-long panel. And the response that I got was overwhelming. And so we had a table where we had, you know, my book, The Final Countdown. I also had Hijacking Bitcoin. And we were just flooded with people the entire day. And some of the takeaways that, you know, I'll provide are this. I mean, and my, you know, position on this is, and my concern is that, you know, while it's great that Doge may be eliminating costs within the federal government, Doge, and actually the way that it's structured, is itself technocracy. It is, you know, kind of technologists, scientists, and engineers kind of making decisions outside of the normal process. And now that may be necessary for cutting the budget, but the consequence of that is, and what comes after that, is something that I don't think that people are ready for or understand. So in any event, that was a terrific event, and I encourage you to take a look at that. I have some other events coming up. I'm going to be at Liberty Forum on April the 25th, and this is going to be a very exciting panel on what happened to crypto adoption. I'm going to be on that with Bruce Fenton, who's, I don't know if I'd call him a Bitcoin maxi, but I think he's kind of representing the Bitcoin maxi side. I mean, he created Ravencoin, so he's certainly not a maxi, but he's certainly more on the pro Bitcoin side. And then Joel Valenzuela, who is, I think kind of more aligned with me on, answering the question of what happened to crypto adoption. Well, we're living on crypto, both of us. And so that's going to be an exciting one. ETH Dam is coming up May the 9th through the 11th in Amsterdam. And so I'm going to be speaking at that as well. Zano will also have a very big presence. So that's going to be an exciting event. Roger has a motion to dismiss hearing on May the 12th, which is actually the day after the ETH Dam event ends. And so this is, his lawyers filed a motion to dismiss, and this hearing has been rescheduled a couple times. It was really supposed to be January the 6th, then it was supposed to be in March, and so now it's changed, but it's at 1:30 p.m. on May the 12th. What I would highly advise people to do is, if you're going to go, which I recommend, get your airline tickets, refundable, and also your hotel refundable, because there are a whole variety of reasons that a hearing like this can be rescheduled, or hopefully, who knows, maybe Roger gets pardoned or the case gets dropped before and the hearing never has to take place. But I still think it's important to go to the event. And so I'm actually going to be flying from Amsterdam directly to LA. So that's going to be a very, very interesting process. And then we have PorcFest June the 16th through the 22nd. And so I encourage everyone to attend that. We are going to have, I'm co-sponsoring with Moneratopia and Doug Tooman, the largest tent at PorcFest. We're going to have an entire week of talks and panels and hands-on demonstrations and getting people signed up to use privacy coins for peer-to-peer digital cash. So it's going to be, what I'm hoping we do is we actually get the 2012 energy that that we had when Roger was at PorcFest or Liberty Forum, and we kind of reignite that, because it's become a little bit stale at some of these events. People aren't as focused on stopping central banks or stopping the war and the violence caused by central banks and trying to work outside of the system. There are a lot of people now focused on Bitcoin strategic reserves, far removed from not only the original intent, but now it's actually even more urgent than it was originally that we adopt these currencies, because if we don't, we're going to get stuck with digital tyranny. And that threat wasn't there, in 2012 or 2010. Bear with me a second. I'm going to need to pin this thing to my profile. So anyway, again, if you could like and share this, that would be greatly appreciated. It seems like there's somebody having a problem with the link. I don't know what all that's about, but in any event, all right. So why we are fasting? So I want to walk through this, and you're probably familiar with this, but fasting for justice has actually been a pretty effective strategy. It's been adopted by a number of people. Cesar Chavez, a guy by the name of Bobby Sands, who fasted for 66 days in Ireland to bring awareness to the situation there. I mean, he ultimately died after the fast, which is actually not common, but 66 days is a long time, and there were some interesting circumstances around that. And of course, probably the most famous, political activist known for fasting is Gandhi, who fasted multiple times, and it was highly effective. In fact, it led to in India, you used to have voting by caste system, and one of his fasts was explicitly effective at actually eliminating that. And then it arguably his last fast before he was assassinated, could be seen as leading to the Brits being actually kicked out of India. So he's probably the clearest example of fasting being an effective tool for political activism. There are other reasons to do it, and fasting in and of itself, as I'll get into, has just incredible benefits at an individual level as well. So it's not like this is one of those things. And I actually want to differentiate a concept here, which is the difference between fasting and starvation. So fasting is, when you don't eat, but your body is essentially using your own fat stores. And you can live for a long time in that fasted state. Now, if you already have almost no body fat, which this is not a problem in the United States, but if in the rare event you have really, really low body fat, then don't participate in a fast. And because when you get to that point where if you're not using your fat reserves, then you actually start wasting away and you start eating muscle and your body starts eating itself. So that's essentially the primary difference between fasting and starvation. But again, there are almost no people for which starvation applies that we're talking about if we're talking about doing a short-term fast. In fact, there are even some thin people that have visceral fat. You actually have fat around your organs. And in fact, it's the visceral fat that's even more dangerous than other forms of fat. And so there are actually a lot of fat, skinny people. So you'd be surprised how much people have in reserves. But I want to talk about what it is that we're fighting for and fasting for in this instance. And that is for Roger's case to be either pardoned or to have the case dropped. And so to bring attention to the case. It's also to raise awareness in general to this theme of Biden crypto lawfare overreach. One of the things that is unfortunate, and while it's great that the SEC seems to be dismissing a lot of cases, meme coins and Ripple and a whole variety of other different cases have been thrown out, but these criminal cases have not been thrown out. So Ian is still in federal prison, and as far as I know, there's been no movement on his case. Roman Storm from Tornado Cash, who, unless I've seen an update today, even though Tornado Cash is no longer, on the target list for the Treasury, his case is still ongoing, and he's still facing up to 45 years in prison. And then Roger's case is actually the most egregious because he is actually looking at 109 years in prison for actually not even committing a crime, for paying his taxes. The other reason to do this, and this is why this case is particularly important to me, because you may say, well, why should I care about Roger? There are all of these other cases. it's really to help revive and amplify the things that he would be talking about and promoting right now, which are desperately needed. I mean, we're at a point where globally CBDCs are being rolled out at an accelerated pace. The euro is on track for a launch in October of this year. So that is a very stepped up time frame. And the rest of the world, in response to Trump saying that the US isn't going to do a CBDC, but yet going full steam ahead on stablecoins, which are a backdoor CBDC, the rest of the world is picking up the pace. So we're looking at 133 countries representing 72% of the global GDP rolling out CBDCs at an accelerated pace, and then the US going even faster with stablecoin legislation, which is a backdoor CBDC. So the situation is actually more dire. And Roger is the most effective person on the planet at promoting the actual use of cryptocurrencies as an alternative to central bank currency. There is no person on the planet that is more effective. And the fact that he's been silenced through this process has been incredibly detrimental. So I've been trying to, which I was doing independent of Roger being arrested or even being in this situation. I had written my book and run for president, and I've been doing workshops and going around the country anyway, warning people about this and trying to show people how to use alternatives. But boy, it would be about 100 times easier and more effective if Roger were able to lend his voice to the situation, because just at the point when he was arrested in Spain, he started to give talks on Zano and on privacy coins and privacy tokens as an alternative. He was literally just getting started. He'd just given his first 1 or 2 talks. And so with his voice and his track record, we would probably be orders of magnitude ahead of where we are right this minute in terms of adoption. And so it's critical that, and what I want to do is I want to share, at least from my perspective, content related to that as well. So in addition to bringing awareness to his situation and getting him out, we also need to not let this lawfare be effective at having a chilling effect on his speech and the message and the solutions that he was putting out there. And so once again, so why are we doing this? So even if you don't like crypto, even if you don't know who Roger is, and even if you're not concerned about central bank digital currencies or any of those other things, you should still be concerned about Roger's case. And here's why. In his case, first of all, at the beginning of the case, the DOJ essentially lied or withheld information to the grand jury. This case never should have even been brought up. The whole basis of this case is they're alleging tax fraud. They're saying that he intentionally concealed Bitcoin. And if you go to freerogernow.org, you will see under motion to dismiss, you can actually see all the legal documents. Roger has provided the emails back and forth between him and his lawyer and accounting firms, where he actually had 3 different layers of professionals involved in this. He knew he would be targeted because of his past political activism and run-ins with the government. And so he actually took a conservative approach to figuring out how to value and estimate this. So he paid his taxes, he hired the right people, and that information apparently wasn't disclosed to the grand jury. So the whole thing was based on a politically motivated justification, which was actually they went after him and they targeted him to stop him from being able to promote these alternative currencies. And this whole thing got accelerated, even though these tax issues go back, in some cases, more than a decade. They didn't convene the grand jury or move forward with the indictment or the process until 2024, after President Biden signed his executive order that authorized a CBDC and authorized a crackdown on crypto. So this entire case was politically motivated. Beyond that, the IRS actually raided his offices with armed agents and violated his attorney-client privilege. So this should be a concern for everyone, whether you're in crypto or not. The idea that your attorney-client privilege could be breached and that armed IRS agents could come into your attorney's office, that affects everyone. And it also means that, if this case goes through and if they're successful, it also means you can't rely on your counsel for advice on things like taxes. Because again, Roger sought advice, got advice, and actually took a conservative approach. And they're still saying that he didn't pay enough, even though in all these years they haven't told him how much he's supposed to pay, or offered any kind of negotiation or settlement. So there's that. And again, he's the best advocate for financial freedom. And he's also probably one of the biggest advocates for freedom causes in general. I mean, outside of crypto, I mean, he's supported groups like FEE, the Brownstone Institute. He was the largest funder of Ross Ulbricht's legal fees. And I will actually show, not in tonight's episode, some of the impact that he's had, because a lot of people aren't aware of it. I wasn't even aware of it when this whole thing started, of just how immense his involvement has been. And the reason that most people don't know is that he doesn't do it publicly. In fact, he probably finds it cringeworthy that, you know, we have to go out and do these kinds of things and even talk about these kinds of things, because this is something that prior to this was completely private. So as to my personal reasons for why I'm advocating for this so strongly, I learned about Bitcoin from Roger in 2012. I wouldn't be in crypto if it weren't for Roger. And I was inspired by his vision of it that I heard in 2012 at a Liberty Forum event, where he talked about the promise of Bitcoin as separating money and state, and money that you could use without third parties, without central governments. This was essentially, he inspired a lot of people at that same talk. In fact, even Bruce Fenton, who I'm going to be on that panel with, my understanding is that's when he heard about and learned about Bitcoin. Jeffrey Tucker, there are countless others. I mean, that the energy from that was palpable. But on top of that, that was why people were in crypto. If you went to a Liberty event in 2012, 2013, people were talking about, yeah, we're going to defeat these central banks. We don't have to deal with, you know, all of these third parties and all of these other entities. Anyone, anywhere in the world can engage in voluntary commerce. And so again, I owe a lot of, I have a lot of gratitude for that. But on top of that, when I stopped using a bank account and started living on crypto, I ended up using Bitcoin Cash, not because Roger told me to, it's because I independently, in trying to figure out which cryptocurrencies to use, that was in 2019, literally the best option for day-to-day transactions, for low fees, and to have a, you know, wide variety of merchants and places that you could use. I didn't use exclusively Bitcoin Cash, but it was my primary. And after I wrote my book and I started doing these workshops, the big concern that I had was, once I saw how far along CBDC development was, including in the United States, it became very clear that the crypto community is not focused on what the key issues are. We had, just in the United States, a retail CBDC pilot that could do 1.8 million transactions per second. And people were still out there pushing Bitcoin with 7 transactions per second. I mean, if you look at how aggressively central banks and others were developing this technology while people were sitting around, you know, fooled by Lightning Network and everything else, I was starting to get a little bit nervous about this, because not only were people not aware of the CBDC threat, but people within crypto weren't working on developing solutions or scaling to be able to offer something competitive to CBDCs. And so Roger hadn't been very vocal for a few years. I mean, he certainly was still actively involved in crypto, but he wasn't as publicly out there cheering for this. And so then when I found that he wrote this book, Hijacking Bitcoin, that I wasn't previously aware of, I was really excited, because I was aware of generally what happened during the block size wars, but I was watching what was going on with new people being onboarded to Bitcoin and being all excited about this digital gold narrative, without realizing what Bitcoin was intended for and understanding what happened to Bitcoin. They're basically buying this narrative. So I was really excited when Hijacking Bitcoin came out, and I asked Roger if I could do an interview, and I actually got the book. I read the book, you know, in one day. The minute I got it, I actually read it a couple of times before doing the interview. And then just 3 weeks after that, he was arrested in Spain. And so to me, it was, I was at first excited that he was getting back and actually exposing this. And then I was kind of devastated that he was shut down. And it was clear for me from the beginning that it was politically motivated, because I was already out warning people about Biden lawfare. I mean, this was there's a chapter of this in my book that I wrote in 2023. So I originally got in this to warn people about the situation that turned out to happen to Roger, and Roger turned out to be the most egregious case. And then beyond that, after Roger was released, he actually saw a podcast that I did, I think on the Shannon Joy show, where I talked about kind of DEFCON 1, how we need easy to use wallets, and that the key for adoption for peer-to-peer digital cash is we need to focus on privacy, but we also need easy to use wallets, and we need easy to use point of sale systems. And so he reached out to me and told me about Zano and told me about that this might be a project that fits with what I'm doing. And so I started researching that and realized, I guess not surprisingly, Roger was on the cutting edge once again. And so he has been continuously about peer-to-peer digital cash and spreading freedom through digital currencies from day one. There's not been a minute where he's been off message, and there's not been a minute where he hasn't been on the cutting edge of that. And so to me, obviously morally, no one should go through what he's going through. But for me, we've got to get him out. Like I'll do everything that I can, including whatever, fast for as long, if whether this turns out to be effective or not. If it can help, I'll do it, because I think it's that important right now to get him out. So how are we fighting? So we're launching this public fast to bring awareness. Hopefully this will bring people's attention to this. We're going to flood the social media with content, not only the content from this podcast and clips, but I encourage you to create your own content and to share some of the other contents that's out there. Share the free Roger Now content, do whatever. I've made clips out of some of the interviews and the Bitcoin Jesus documentary and so forth, just to get the word out there, because I have spoken at over 24 events in the last year, and I've done over 100 podcast interviews. And I will tell you, even going to this event that I was at with 500 people in New York, almost no one has heard about the fact that Bitcoin used to be used as peer-to-peer digital cash. Almost no one. I mean, this information is not getting out there. So even though many of you listening to this might be like, oh, well, I already know about this. I already knew about the block size war. I already know about all these other things that are going on. Understand that the people that were involved in that represent like 0.0001% of the planet. And what's more alarming is when you talk to people that, I talked to, there were some older people in this group, and several of them came up and said, oh, my son is interested in this, and so on and so forth. And, oh, when did they get involved? So if somebody got involved, there are people that are now saying that they're veterans in Bitcoin because they got involved in 2021. There are people that have never heard of any of this information. Literally, the only thing they've ever heard of is what Michael Saylor says, or what's in the Bitcoin standard. Like the whole actual history of what happened has never gotten across their desk at all. And in part, this is because of a lot of the censorship that's gone on that I've experienced as well. So we need to flood the content. And the content's not just about his case, but it's about the message that Roger would be saying if he were allowed to talk about it, which relates to the fact that, we need peer-to-peer digital cash. There are solutions out there, and to kind of identify what the real threat is. And I think, I'm not interested in getting into a big war with Bitcoin maxis, and that's not the point of this. But I do think that there's an issue here now where what happened during the block size war is not settled at all, or at least I think the bigger issue right now is, I'd be willing to say, look, use whatever cryptocurrency you want. If you want Bitcoin, that's fine. But now people are trying to use civil asset forfeiture and taxpayer money through this Bitcoin strategic reserve to basically force people to buy Bitcoin. And that's a whole other new area. And what I found is, there are a lot of people and legislators, they've never heard of hijacking Bitcoin either. They don't know anything about the backstory. So people are dealing with a real finite set of information. And so it's really important now, because I think we're about to critically make a series of mistakes. One is patriotically rallying around stablecoins, and then two, loading up taxpayer money and using civil asset forfeiture and the force of the state to push and accelerate Bitcoin, which is going to be disastrous, because I just saw a tweet that I retweeted today. The blocks are empty. People aren't using Bitcoin. And at some point, there's going to be a problem, probably during the next halving, and they're going to have to increase the 21 million supply, or otherwise it's not going to be economically viable for miners. And then this is going to create a whole situation for everybody that is now getting involved with Bitcoin that doesn't understand the underlying economic model. So also part of this is to encourage people to sign the open letter at freerogernow.org, which I encourage everyone to do if you haven't already. So with that, I'm going to move on to what actually happens during a fast. And, I want to start with a disclaimer. And this isn't the normal disclaimer about, oh, I'm not giving you medical advice. I actually am going to give you kind of a different disclaimer. I wouldn't want to give you medical advice in the sense that most of the medical advice that is dispensed by doctors is not directed at improving your health in any way, shape, or form. So, there's this thing the disclaimer is supposed to be always consult your doctor first. And I want to say, I haven't had a general practitioner in 15 years, but I actually think that we are responsible for our own health first, not outsourcing it even to our doctor first. The doctor may be somebody that you want to include as part of your analysis, but it's probably not the person that you want to go to first. Ultimately, we are responsible for controlling our own thoughts, our own emotions, and our own actions. And this is actually a key point of why, we started Daylight Freedom Foundation in general, which is, the way forward here is through kind of self-improvement and self-transformation, not through political processes or whatever. The reason that I ended up working on the threat of technocracy and things like CBDCs is technocracy is actually a threat to free will. If technocracy is able to flourish, then we'll literally lose the ability to exercise our own thoughts, emotions, and actions. And so if the threat of technocracy wasn't there, I wouldn't be doing any of this. I would be, working on a whole variety of other things related to meditating and doing a whole variety of other things, which I will be talking about over these podcasts in the next few weeks. But on top of that, when it comes to your doctor likely knows nothing about fasting. I actually researched what the medical curriculum is. And if you look at this, if you can read this in the U.S. medical system, doctors only get about 22 hours of training on nutrition in general, right? So the idea that food is what you eat and what you drink is even related to your health. This is a very minimized and insubstantial part of curriculum. But when you talk about fasting, it's often not included in the curriculum at all. And usually the only context is in the context of the use of fasting prior to medical procedures, which I think should have been a clue for somebody. If it's effective and useful for you to fast before a medical procedure, maybe it's useful for other reasons, but that literally has never crossed the textbooks or curriculum for your doctor. So if you ask your doctor about fasting, your doctor's likely to know nothing. If your doctor knows something, I'll be surprised, but so keep this in mind. And if you look at medical schools in Europe, it's a similar situation where it's typically not even mentioned at all, even in the context of medical procedures. And so your doctor is not going to be very knowledgeable about this particular topic. In general, since I've spent so much time fasting, part of what happens when you're doing a fast is you spend a lot of time thinking about and researching your relationship with food and how all of that works. And then you start researching how fasting itself works. And there are all kinds of biblical and historical references to 40-day fasts. And so this applies to whether it's, Jesus or Moses or Noah. You have Egyptian mystery schools, Greek mystery schools. Pythagoras actually did a 40-day fast before entering a mystery school. So 40-day fasts have a kind of a long history. And so, because again, I'll talk to a lot of people like, oh, you didn't eat for 3 days. Are you going to die? Water's a different situation, but fasting has been largely overlooked. I mean, in terms of, well, how long can you fast? Obviously, it depends on how much you have in fat stores to begin with. But Angus Barbary here is a guy, I believe, from Scotland who successfully fasted for 382 days in a row. and didn't die. So again, I mean, there are other people that will say, well, based on biblical things, you can't fast for more than 40 days or you'll die for some reason. And that's also not true. So just to put that out there, if you're new to fasting, that fasting is not only not as dangerous, but it actually has more of a historical tradition than people think. So based on my experience, and again, if you want to talk to a doctor, but I would also consider in general, taking your own agency for your own healthcare. And now with AI, there's, an ability for you to do your own research, and you should start doing your own research, and you should start taking control of all aspects of your life. You are ultimately responsible. But based on my experience, I would say start slow and build incrementally. I didn't start out doing a 38-day fast. I started out doing intermittent fasting, first 12 hours, then 16 hours, then 18 hours, and then it built. So if you're actually new to fasting, I wouldn't even recommend necessarily jumping into a 7-day fast. You want to kind of play with it, but do your own research and also be compassionate to yourself. I've done long fasts where, I was going to do a 10-day fast and I ended up stopping on day 8, or was going to do 7 days, or actually the reason I did a 38-day fast was I was trying to do a 40-day fast. And then the last 2 days, which, at some point I'll talk about as we get longer into this, the issue became with my teeth, and, I'm just like, all right, these last 2 days are not productive. I'm not having any kind of magical spiritual experience. So my fasting experience, I mean, you can see kind of the before and after. So 38 days, I started fasting in 2019, kind of on and off, again, intermittent fasting. And then 2022, 2023, I did over 200 days of fasting. And so during that time, lost 100 pounds roughly, with 38 days being the longest. But again, the 38-day fast wasn't for weight loss. By the time and I'll explain what happens biologically and in other ways at various points during the fast. The intention behind the 38-day fast was more kind of spiritual in nature and kind of pushing the envelope in other ways. And so, and in fact, I've come to find that I think it makes sense to use fasting as a regular function just to reboot your immune system and to help prevent other conditions, which I'll discuss. So there were other significant health improvements as well, just beyond weight, which as I go through this day by day, like if I'm on day 1 of the fast versus day 7 of a fast or day 10 of a fast, I'm going to explain for that day what's going on kind of in the body, and then also sharing what my personal experience is during this fast, and then also sharing if that's been similar to my experiences in other fasts. And I'm hopeful that if other people are joining in and participating, that people will share their own experiences as well. I posted today, I said, if the nation did a 3-day fast, that would do more than in 3 days than Maha will do in 4 years. It really is that powerful and impactful. And part of why I'm going to do these podcasts is to explain why and how that goes. So I have some additional goals above and beyond raising awareness for Roger's case. I want to also use this as an opportunity to teach others about the power of fasting. I actually think it is one of the most important things that you can do. Obviously, I'm not a fan of government solutions at all. I'm a fan of we should take our own agency and be responsible for our own thoughts and actions and emotions. And I actually think that fasting really does, it is probably the most impactful thing that you can do to kickstart that process, because once you start going through this fasting and the longer you're in it, you really start questioning everything about how the world works, not just related to food, but it really does open up questioning, specifically because you realize as you're fasting and you start asking questions about, okay, why do we eat 3 meals a day? Why, how did we get the food pyramid that we got that caused all of the obesity? And once you realize how much we've been lied to about nutrition, about health, about fasting, then you realize, okay, well, that probably extends to other areas as well. And then you really start questioning everything. And you start doing a lot of that within the fasting period. So I have another goal with this, which is to lose 50 pounds by Pork Fest. You know, one thing I have learned about all this, so I've struggled with weight my entire life. And, you know, I get a little, part of the reason that I'm so pissed at public health is my parents didn't know any better. So they actually followed that USDA food pyramid, and which I remember was in health textbooks and everything else. And I remember when I was younger, like, oh, you should lose some weight. So I went and met with a nutritionist, and the nutritionist said, well, here, you know, you need to cut out fat from your diet. Here, go and have Snackwell cookies. Like, go to the cookie aisle, because the trend at that point in time was, you know, any fat was bad, but sugar and carbs, literally you had at the base of this pyramid 11 to 15 servings. So this whole thing actually screwed up my insulin, but like it's been disastrous. And so the need to actually even go to the nutritionist was caused by following the original health guidelines to begin with, and then the nutritionist guidelines actually made it worse. So in any event, I'm going to, you know, utilize fasting for the other thing about me, which the other thing is I'll be sharing a lot of information about myself through this fast, because it's just part of the process. And when you're thinking about these things, and I don't mind sharing them. I mean, I'm not embarrassed by it. I actually think it'll help other people. So things that people might be, you know, embarrassed to talk about, I think those are probably the things that we should talk about. They're part of our own personal journey and part of our personal growth. But, you know, for me, my normal, if I'm in good health, then I will normally walk 20,000 steps a day. I mean, not as a weight loss activity, but just I enjoy walking. That's where I do my best thinking. I'll even do calls while I'm walking. I mean, that's kind of my default. And I have been traveling nonstop, then had a knee injury. So like for the past 4 or 5 months, I have not been able to get that exercise. And then I've been traveling. And so when I get hyper focused on something, I tend to forget about everything else. And so it's a blessing and a curse. The good news is when I focus on something, it's like I've got a ton of energy and I can power through and do anything. The bad news is that what usually what goes by the wayside is me focusing on my own personal health. And this is just, you know, something that's happened. And so I'm actually trying to recalibrate this by integrating fasting into kind of my activities in life here, and sharing that with other people. Because, you know, for me, I often will go in sprints where I'll like just hyper focus on something for a couple of years, and then I'll actually take 6 months off. And so now the magnitude of what we're up against right now is with the threat of technocracy and CBDCs and all of this lawfare. This is not, unfortunately, a short-term sprint, but it's also not a marathon either. It's kind of a series of consecutive sprints. And so trying to figure out how to get recovery in there is part of the thing. The other thing I think that you should expect is probably over the next month, I'll produce more content than I've produced in the previous year. And this is truly one of the amazing things that people don't realize. Once your body becomes fat adapted and starts using your own fat for energy, your brain starts running off of ketones. And I will tell you, it is all brain fog goes away. Your energy levels and mental acuity go through the roof. And I mean, it's amazing not only the amount of work you can get done, but kind of the amount of breakthroughs. So I am planning for that based on previous experience. And so plan on producing a lot of content. I'm going to walk through the fasting health milestones by day. So once again, if you're not familiar at all with fasting, a lot of this will be surprising to you in terms of what actually goes on. Because if you've not been exposed to it, you might just think, oh, well, this is, you know, it's an eating disorder. You're not eating, or there's some kind of, you know, issue with this, but how can it have good health benefits? You must be in a horrible state when you come out of a fast. And so what actually happens is on day one, you have the metabolic shift begins. And I'll talk specifically in the next slide about exactly what's going on day one. By day 3 of a fast, if you've done a 3-day fast, your immune system does a complete reboot, which is why one of the things that I am trying to incorporate is the idea of doing a 3-day fast with the change of every season. So just as a way to kind of, you know, kickstart the immune system as the seasons change. By day 5, autophagy activates. So autophagy is where your own body basically cleanses itself of all of the dead and bad cells. And so this is a really powerful process. And again, as we go through each day, I'll show some of the benefits of this in terms of your skin and kind of all of your organs and all of your systems and what goes on as you do more of this prolonged fasting. By day 7, you're in complete fat burning mode. You are what is called fat adapted, and you are running on ketones. And so this is another thing. So there may be some muscle loss with this, but and actually, well, I'll talk about this in a minute. I actually lifted weights today in part to get rid of the glycogen in my system so that I can move more quickly to being fat adapted, because your body can run on these ketones. And you are also kind of in this heightened sense, you are in a survival mode in a sense. And so your body actually protects, goes into overdrive to protect the good stuff. And then it actually recycles and works through the bad stuff, even including in extreme cases, which we'll talk about in later podcasts, cancer cells. By day 10, you have a big growth hormone boost. By day 14, you're in stable ketosis. And by day 21, this is where you have peak stem cells being created. So again, this is you're in overdrive in terms of what your body is doing for repair. And then again, day 40, this is the kind of the biblical reference. This is where you're at kind of peak mental clarity. So more specifically, since we're on day 1, what happens on day 1 is glycogen breakdown starts. So your body is going after whatever your stored up, carbs are first. And your insulin levels begin to drop, and you begin this process of creating ketones. So again, your liver begins this process of starting to burn fat as a fuel source. So that's what happens on day 1. Now I'm going to reflect on what's going on with me personally, so just so I can describe my experience, and hopefully others again will share theirs, and then also give you some pro tips for this. So in terms of what kind of fast is this, it's a no calorie fast. It's water, and I will say liquid only. So what I'll have is water with electrolytes. The idiocracy people would be thrilled with this, but actually electrolytes are critical for this. And I recommend in particular this brand, and by the way, nobody's paying me for this or no advertising sponsorships, but I like Dr. Berg's electrolyte powder because it has the right amount in particular of potassium, which is very important and very difficult to get actually. Even bananas, when you're not fasting and you're eating bananas actually have a pretty low amount of potassium, and then they're not worth the sugar and the insulin spike, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing that I recommend is salt, and I do drink black coffee, but I will put salt and then maybe even some electrolyte powder, plain electrolyte powder in my coffee. In all of the fasting that I've done, as I said, over 200 days just in those 2 years alone, I've only had one really bad situation, which was I did pass out, and I passed out because stupidly I went and had with my kids to the coffee shop. I had an espresso. I didn't have salt in it, and so that was the issue. So my wife just handed me these are our plain electrolytes. This is I get all this on Amazon. Keto K1000. Then I have some other electrolytes in addition to the Dr. Berg's. This is Ultima. I actually like the flavor of this. This doesn't have as much in terms of potassium, but it does have a lot of other electrolytes. And then this is the thank you, wife. Here are the Dr. Berg electrolytes, and these have 1,000 milligrams of potassium, and that's really the key. And it also has 120 milligrams worth of magnesium. So again, this stuff is really important, because if you do take the electrolytes and the salt along with this, then you can actually function properly. I mean, this isn't one of those things where you're like, oh my God, I'm fasting, I'm weak, I've got no energy. If you actually learn how to hack this properly, overall, you can actually be more productive working while fasting, but you have to know these kinds of tips and tricks. So with that said, that's the quick overview on what fasting is all about. but I will go through in much, much more detail on the magic of this on a day-by-day basis. But the whole purpose of today is just to do the overview. And I will say today and the next 2 days are probably going to be the worst days in terms of my performance, because I am not yet operating on ketones, and I haven't fasted for a while. So it's like right now I feel hungry. My experience today was I didn't have any issues with hunger for the first, say, 16 hours. And then I get hunger pains. You have this hormone called ghrelin, and it goes in cycles. So when you feel hungry, just know that, like, feel through it. It's not going to last for very long. It might last for a half an hour or so. And then it'll go away. And so it'll go in cycles. And then eventually, by the time you become fat adapted and start processing and using ketones, you don't actually have those hunger pains. And it gets really weird. I mean, it gets to the point where, because you start thinking about your relationship with food, I would actually watch cooking shows, but not from the standpoint of I'm hungry, but from the standpoint of, all right, I'm thinking about, all right, what happens after the fast and I break the fast? How do I kind of ramp up and improve my diet and relationship with food? Anyway, we'll go through all of this. Today, I want to go through the overview of Roger's situation. And so I'm going to start. This is going to be, again, a very high level overview. And rather than me even talk about it, if you haven't seen the documentary, Bitcoin Jesus, I'm going to play that now. This is the best overview of his situation, and it's, in his own words. And so I'm going to play that now, and then I will pop back. So let me share the screen. Okay, let me hop on.
and there were dozens, if not hundreds, of other people selling that exact same product on eBay.
All right, hold on a second. I understand that people can't actually hear the audio for this. Is this true? All right, I'm going to have to. Okay, you can hear it now. All right, my apologies for this. I might have to. Let me try something. I don't know why the audio wasn't functioning for that. Let me try this again. I'm just going to load this back up. Okay, let me try this. See if it works. If I share this tab.
My name is Roger Veer, and I'm 45 years old. I was born in America, but several years ago, I made the difficult decision to renounce my citizenship. For more than 2 decades, I've been relentlessly targeted by the US government. Now I'm facing the possibility of spending the rest of my life in prison, up to 109 years, for crimes I did not commit. This is my story.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange faced up to 175 years in prison.
John McAfee had just been ordered extradited to the United States on tax evasion charges.
Donald J. Trump arrested, fingerprinted, and charged with 34 felony counts.
This case really is lawfare at its worst.
We are clearly enabled in a lawfare environment.
The US government don't really like it when someone stands up to them in any way, shape, or form.
Lawfare isn't new. Lawfare has been happening for decades. At the time that the war with Roger began 25 years ago, he was one of the only ones, and very few Americans were aware this was happening. But now, lawfare has reached to the highest levels. My name is Tracy Thurman. It's a little hard to describe what I do. I come in on cases where people are facing lawfare, and I do everything I can to help them. I only take cases I believe in, and I only take cases that I care about. Roger's case is one of those.
You grew up in Silicon Valley. What was that like? And what was your family like?
And I'll wish whoever does the editing good luck with chopping all this together as well. So I grew up in Silicon Valley, and as a teenager, I ran one of the most popular BBSs, that stands for Bulletin Board System, which was kind of the internet before the internet. And so I ran that out of my bedroom. And one summer, I think maybe between 7th and 8th grade, my mother told me I wasn't allowed to play any more video games, and I had to go do something else. And so I went and looked on the bookshelf, and I saw a book called Socialism by a man named Ludwig von Mises. It basically explains how incredibly important money is, and the prices that they transmit aren't just prices of goods. It's information as to what goods should be used to produce what other goods, and what labor and what human resources should be used to produce other things. And without the free flow of money, the signals or the communications get distorted. And anytime the government gets involved in the flow of money, it's blocking these price signals. And the more economics I studied, the more I realized that anytime government is intervening in the economy, they're retarding the world's rate of economic growth.
Welcome to the Libertarian Party's 2000 presidential debate.
I wanted to tell people about these ideas. And so one of the ways that I thought would be efficient to tell more people around the world about the benefits of free markets and entrepreneurship and getting the government out of the way of the economy was to run for political office as a libertarian in the United States.
Each candidate is going to be given 5 minutes.
I got to have numerous debates and meet lots of interesting people, but it was in one debate in particular at San Jose State University where I was debating the Republican and Democratic candidates, and unbeknownst to me at the time, in the audience were some ATF agents. And I called the ATF and FBI a bunch of jackbooted thugs and murderers in reference to murdering children in Waco, Texas.
Come out with your hands up. 911, what's your emergency?
They're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
There were dozens of young children there. They literally sent in tanks and men with guns, and they set the entire place on fire, and then they posed for photos on top of the bodies of dead kids.
Civilians, including 24 children, were killed.
You don't murder kids. And when Bitcoin came along, it was clear to me that that was the kryptonite to government's ability to wage wars and to control people and to interfere in the economy. And there was nothing that was going to stop me from telling people about how important this was.
For Roger, that was the beginning of asking very serious questions about the US government. And honestly, it was the beginning of the persecution against him.
Before crypto, I'd been involved in e-commerce, and I was selling mainly computer memory on the internet. And I was also selling a product called a Pest Control Report 2000, which was basically a firecracker that farmers would use to scare birds away out of their cornfield. And I was selling these on eBay, back when eBay had a guns and ammo section, and there were dozens, if not hundreds of other people selling that exact same product on eBay. I wound up being the only person ever in the entire history of the world to be charged criminally for selling those without a license.
Can you imagine the U.S. government spend money and time to imprison Roger Ver over firecrackers?
In a meeting between Roger, his attorney, the ATF agent, and the prosecutor, Roger's attorney was asking the prosecutor, look, wouldn't this be a case normally where you would just tell the guy to go to get a license? Maybe you'd fine him, but you wouldn't be seeking prison time. And at that point, the ATF agent pounds his fist on the table and says, but you didn't hear what he said about us. That clears up completely whether this was a politically motivated case or not.
I literally became politically persecuted for saying things that I believe in my heart of hearts to be true. If you murder kids, you're a murderer. And so anyhow, I did my 10 months in federal prison. And so I wound up, waiting the 3 years of federal probation that I had. And literally on the very day I was allowed to leave, I left the United States, and I haven't lived there again since because they made me terrified to live there. I was born there. All my family's there. That's where I grew up. That's the place I love and will be near and dear to my heart forever. But these people just made it so frightening for me to be there, because the constant harassment over and over and over.
All of our founding fathers gave up their citizenships because the country from which they came was no longer a place that they could call home. And when they did it, it was treason. Every single one of them knew if they were captured, that was the end, and the end would not be a pretty one. And yet they stood firm, they made that decision, and they acted out of bravery and principle. And Roger's a person who's done that too.
Anytime people exposed information that their government wanted to be kept secret, those people were called traitors, and yet history views them as patriots and heroes.
When they sent me to prison the first time, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, but it worked in the sense that they got me to shut up and to be quiet.
You can't put it in your wallet. Your computer makes it, and it trades like a stock. It's called Bitcoin.
In 2011, when I heard about Bitcoin for the first time, I knew it was one of the most important inventions in the entire history of the world. And I went on to become the very first person in the world to start investing in the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin ecosystem, and seeded basically the entire first generation of cryptocoin and Bitcoin businesses. Get involved right now today. Tell everybody you know about this wonderful, amazing thing that's about to change the lives of everybody in the entire planet called Bitcoin.
He was the first American entrepreneur, maybe in the world, to really see the potential of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
I knew it when I began promoting Bitcoin that this is something so powerful to the existing power structures that they'll do whatever they can to stop it or shut it down.
A brilliant innovator and a great humanitarian who cares about one thing more than anything else, and that is the topic of human freedom.
I couldn't be quiet any longer. I had to speak out, and that's what I did, and it was the right thing to do, and I don't regret it one bit.
A digital currency in which transactions can be performed without the need for a central bank. Woody, what is a Bitcoin?
Bitches in the future?
This is Wheel of Fortune, Joe! Bitcoin is the future.
This is the first time in the entire history of the world in which anybody on the planet with the internet can send or receive money with anyone else anywhere, and there's absolutely no way that anybody can interfere with that in any way. I would tell anybody that I would get to listen to me about Bitcoin, but the vast majority of people just kind of laughed at me or didn't take it seriously or just, kind of thought I was crazy for being so interested in some, internet nerd money that nobody was using. But As each year went by, it gained more and more traction, it got more and more attention from around the world. And today it's, the talk of, people all over the planet.
This is historic for the crypto
The
space.
Bitcoin rocket ship keeps climbing.
Bitcoin trounced the 100,000. It might go to 150K.
You actually know this guy, Roger, is it Ver?
Roger Ver.
He's earned the nickname Bitcoin Jesus.
Who is known as Bitcoin Jesus.
Bitcoin Jesus himself.
Because he has proselytized. He's been very supportive of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin Jesus.
Or Roger Ver's guy.
Yeah, I would prefer that was not my nickname. Eventually, he was murdered by the government of his day. I would prefer not to meet the same fate.
Leave it to the Biden administration to try to figure out a way to crucify Bitcoin Jesus.
Cryptocurrencies in general are absolutely an opportunity for the entire world to have more personal and economic freedom and to shrink the control of violent third parties from interfering in people's lives all over the planet. Because when you're using Bitcoin as money, at this point, cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin, it helps defund wars and helps defund government interference in the economy and helps grow the private sector and helps shrink the government sector. The private sector doesn't necessarily need anything from the government. And so the more things we can privatize around the world, the better off everybody will be in the entire world.
Digital currency may be the most effective way the world has ever seen to increase economic freedom. It doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter where you were born, and it doesn't matter where you live today. You now can interact financially with every other human being on the planet without needing permission from anybody. And it almost makes you want to cry. It's so exciting for the world to see that become available.
Bitcoin Jesus is under arrest in Spain on U.S. tax and mail fraud charges. Roger Ver is accused of evading nearly $50 million in taxes after earning $240 million trading cryptocurrency.
If you want to build a system that allows for freedom, the most important element you can have besides freedom of speech is freedom of transaction.
And so imagine a world in which every single financial transaction you make is tracked and recorded. And not only that, but if they don't like what you're spending your money on, or if they don't like the things that you're saying politically, they can prevent you from spending your money. That's a scary, scary world to live in.
For many people, the first time they ever heard of debanking, of freezing of assets for politically wrong speech, was the Canadian trucker protests.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze an account without a court order.
If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges.
Banks have already started to freeze the accounts of people involved in the protest.
If your money can be turned off, you are not a free man.
So as we're recording this, we are in a little island off the coast of mainland Spain called Mallorca. And I'm here because the United States government had me arrested earlier this year while I was visiting Spain for what I thought was going to be a 4-day business trip.
He is not permitted to leave the island. He cannot get on a boat. He cannot get on a plane. He cannot do anything other than sit here on this island waiting for the Spanish government to send him to U.S. custody.
They're charging me with tax evasion and mail fraud. But the mail fraud is simply that the tax returns were sent in the mail. There's actually 3 charges of mail fraud because we sent the first tax return. The IRS claimed they didn't get it, so we sent it again. So they're charging 2 separate counts of mail fraud for sending the same tax return 2 times in the mail because they claimed they didn't get it the first time. And then they're charging me with a 3rd count of mail fraud for sending another year's tax return a couple of years later. 90 of those 109 years are for simply putting the tax returns in the mail and sending them to them. So there's no fraud about that at all. So as I was pulling up to my house this morning after running some errands, the Spanish SWAT team had the street basically blocked off, and it really spooked me. But either they weren't looking for me or somehow I got away. But we're going to drive by again and see if they're still there. Well, they're gone now. They were all right here. Thankfully, they don't seem to have been there for me. So another day with a bit more freedom, although we'll have to go to the courthouse here shortly for my once every 2-day check-in to make sure that to prove to them that I didn't run away.
One day there will be a knock at his door, And at that moment, he will be experiencing potentially the last moments of freedom he will have for the rest of his life. That's a terrible burden to live under. That at every moment, you don't know, is this my last moment of freedom?
I think the way I look at it is that the worst that can happen is they kill me. Then it's no longer my problem, right? So, of course, I'll put this on the record. I am in no way, shape, or form suicidal in any way, and I would never, ever do anything like suicide by cop or anything like that ever. So if I wind up dead by any sort of mysterious circumstances, 1,000% sure I did not take my own life in any way, shape, or form. I would absolutely never do that, ever.
John McAfee, found dead today in a prison cell in Spain. The founder of the antivirus software that bears his name had just been ordered extradited to the United States on tax evasion charges.
After failing to report income made from promoting cryptocurrencies.
And the widow of technology entrepreneur John McAfee says she does not accept claims that her late husband died by suicide.
Janice McAfee said in a Twitter post on Sunday, quote, "The U.S. authorities are determined to have John die in prison to make an example of him for speaking out against the corruption within their government agencies."
Claiming the U.S. government wanted to silence him over challenges to the dollar as the world's reserve currency.
In April of 2024, Roger came to Spain for what he thought would be 4 days for a conference. Instead, he's been here ever since. He was arrested and thrown into the same prison where John McAfee died. He was in that prison for 3.5 weeks until he was granted bail against the wishes of the United States. And then when he was granted bail, he was sent to the island of Mallorca. Every 2 days, he has to go to the court and check in to prove that he is still here. He's waiting to know, will he be back in the U.S. as a free man? Or will he be back in the U.S. in shackles?
At the time I renounced my U.S. citizenship and expatriated, there were absolutely no rules or guidance whatsoever from the IRS as to how to pay taxes on Bitcoin. But I told my professionals and my attorneys and tax accountants that I knew I was a target for government persecution and that we had to make sure everything was done perfect.
He says to his attorneys, I know the IRS is likely to audit me. I need this to be done perfectly. I need every T crossed. I need every I dotted.
I had my accountants, I had the tax attorneys, and then I hired additional former federal prosecutors to check all the work down. So I had like 3 separate layers of people checking people's work all the way down to make sure everything was perfect in regards to that.
The irony of Roger's case is that the government paints him as a person who's evading his taxes. But the evidence when you read the actual filings, when you read the actual emails between him and his attorneys, shows a man who is doing his absolute best to comply at every turn.
This isn't about taxes. This isn't about money. This is about trying to suppress people from spreading American ideals to the world through the use of cryptocurrency.
Roger Ver is a world-famous crypto pioneer. He is being charged by the United States on extremely dubious grounds, somewhat similar to the way John McAfee, also in Spain, a crypto pioneer, was arrested at the request of American law enforcement.
So they're using the tax system as a form of lawfare. As an example, to the rest of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency world, don't you dare innovate. Yeah, his name is Roger Ver. Started a petition on his behalf. You can sign it. That'll help. FreeRogerNow.org.
I haven't been able to see my mom and dad for coming up on a decade because of this. And every day I wonder if I'm ever going to get to see them again before the day they die or before the day I die. One of the things that I want most in life is to spend time with I haven't seen my parents for a long, long time.
The framers of our country were wise men. Men who understood that throughout human history, power tends to corrupt, and it tends to corrupt absolutely. And that with each generation, there would have to be people who are willing to risk all to protect freedom and risk everything in order to express that view once more. Roger was one of those people, and he's paid the price for doing so.
Once they take me out of the way, it's even easier for them to go after everybody else out there, because if they can do this to me with the resources and the people that I have supporting me, they can do it to absolutely anybody.
The lawfare in this country is only going to end if we decide that we are all going to stand up for our fellow Americans, whether we agree with them politically or not. We can choose right now as Americans, which direction do we go? Do we head toward tyranny? Do we head toward a new American century of freedom, of hope, of finding a national unity again? And in order to do that, the lawfare must stop, and our heroes have to come home.
I don't know who said it, but in history they said first they came for the so-and-so and nobody spoke out, and then they came for the next group and nobody spoke out, and by the time they came for me, there was nobody left to speak out. And that's why it's so important for all of us to speak out all of the time, so that they can't take us down one at a time. It was Ronald Reagan who said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. My name is Roger Ver. This is my story. I hope to God it never becomes yours.
So there you have it. That is, the way to kick off this fast is probably the best way to give the overview is, again, Roger speaking in his own words. It's a tragic situation in terms of what's going on with this lawfare and frankly, the ongoing struggles he's had just for speaking the truth about things that are, obvious and tragic going on, whether it's the ATF or, speaking out against, central banks. This is why he's in this position, is for speaking the truth and for promoting alternatives. And so that's a great way to kick this off. So there are some calls to action with this. And I want this to be, productive, this whole effort. You can go to freerogernow.org and sign the open letter if you haven't already. Plan to attend his hearing on May the 12th in LA. Join the fast if you can. If not, understandable as well. Or if, again, start out small, or just even anything that you can do will help to focus attention on this. And then please share this podcast or any other Roger related content. I don't know what's going on with this. I've shared this now in a couple of different places and it's getting no additional views. So there's something going on here. But in any event, any help to amplify this podcast. Also create and share your own content. You can use any of my content. You can use pretty much any of the content I think you find out there, or at freerogernow.org. Just help to get the word out. And then I would say participate in a live Q&A that's going to come after this. Because I found when I do these clips, some of the interaction is very helpful for other people. And then if people want to come up during the course of this fast and share their stories about how Roger's impacted their life, then that would be really helpful as well, because I can take those clips and we can share those clips. And so I really encourage you to get engaged. And to me, it really is important that we amplify and get the word out as much as humanly possible before the end of Trump's first 100 days, while he still has political capital. I want to talk about, so all the fasting that I've done, I've spent hundreds of hours researching this topic in addition to being actively engaged in it. So right now what I'm trying to do is I'm putting together these podcasts each day, is I'm actually going through and looking at trying to go back and find, what sources I primarily use. And so I will say these are the first three that I would start with. One is Dr. Eric Berg. And there's an interesting thing here, but both of these doctors, they're actually both chiropractors. And there's a very interesting thing that I found as I started going through this spiritual journey, is that you will find a lot of chiropractors there. You will not find traditional medical doctors. And there are reasons for that. And certainly that'll be a topic of discussion for another day. But Dr. Eric Berg has like 13 million followers on YouTube, and he's really popularized intermittent fasting. And so I started my journey kind of through him doing keto and intermittent fasting. And then that was really my transition point into prolonged fasting. The guy who seems really at the cutting edge of prolonged fasting is this Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and you can find his information on YouTube as well. He actually operates a water fast clinic, and he actually does medically supervised water fasts up to 40 days. And so this has been used for some pretty severe, I mean, he'll go through his examples where he's discussed how, certain people with even stage 4 cancer have actually come out and cured their underlying situation by doing a medically assisted 40-day fast. And so he has a ton of content on this. And so I encourage you to watch some of his interviews and do some research on him as well. And I know there's another medically assisted clinic, I believe in Germany, that focuses on this as well, but it is so rare. And again, think about how rare it is, because all of our modern medical system is oriented towards selling people drugs or selling people devices. There is literally no money in fasting. There isn't even any money in food. Literally, you do nothing. I mean, it's not like big water is going to get involved. It's not like you're consuming, excessive amounts of, like, there's no money in it. The idea is get out of your own body's way, and your own body will actually correct itself, provided you're not throwing junk at it and you give it the space to do what it needs to do. It's actually not a hell of a lot more complicated than that. And then the last is Dave Asprey's Fast This Way. So he wrote a book on fasting, but I really read his book after I'd already kind of figured this out from other sources. But his book is actually pretty helpful in encapsulating some of this. And he's the bulletproof coffee guy, and he's been doing a lot of biohacking for a number of years, and so that's actually a pretty good reference as well. But I will, each day be sharing more and more resources, particularly as I go back and dig up and I forgot about that documentary, I forgot about that research report or whatever. But there are quite a bit of resources out there. You just have to look for them. And again, you can imagine how I know Dr. Berg has been severely shadow banned. And in fact, I haven't even looked to see if Goldhammer stuff is even on there. This is the kind of information that YouTube would definitely censor, right? The last thing anybody wants is somebody going out there fighting, oh, wait a minute, I can just do nothing and, stay out of my body's way and it cures things. There are a whole bunch of people that don't want to see that happening or let that secret out. So I hope you can still find these resources, and I will look for them as well. I didn't actually think to double check about whether or not the prolonged fasting videos were out there, but I will take a look at that as well. And so now I'm going to actually move it over to kind of a live Q&A and roundtable discussion. I see that we have Dan O'Neill here, who I often have on here. Dan, I know I've talked to, he's done a lot of fasting successfully before as well, so we've had some similar experiences. And anyone else that wants to actually join these live conversations, I know people are hesitant to talk in general about these things, but it really is helpful. And it's also helpful for me to actually get feedback as to whether this content is informative or engaging. And it's tough to do when I can't see the person in front of me or get any kind of direct feedback. So anyway, I just posted the link to the StreamYard. Anybody else who wants to join is welcome to join. I'll add Dan right now. Dan, are you there?
Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I fasted a couple of years ago. I started getting into it for the first time when I was after a bad surgery. I had my ankle. I went cliff jumping and smashed my ankle up pretty bad. I gained like 300 pounds, and I hit a point in my life. I was in my 40s and
I can't hear you. You were cutting in, and I was here. I could hear you, and then now I can't hear you. Yeah, I can't hear you now. It was fine at the very beginning, and now no audio.
All right.
Oh, there we go.
So, here I am. Can Perfect. So what happened with me? I was about 307 pounds. I'm in my mid 40s. Athletically speaking, I was like next to nothing. And I'm still, I'm an electrical worker. I'm trying to be active. But so I went on a fast. And I realized I hit a point in my life where I'm going to be, they're going to be recommending blood pressure medicine and diabetes medicine and all sorts of pharmaceuticals. And I can't stand the pharmaceutical companies. So I said to myself, I just got to go on a fast and I got to figure this out. I lost 100 pounds that year. And I realized it was like going through a time machine. And I went from being this inactive guy that thought I was pretty much, done with. I'm in my mid 40s. I'm done. And now I started learning how to surf. I've been highly creative, started getting into a lot of things. And when you do fast, you do get a lot of energy, and you got to figure out what to do with all of it. So, that's my. It was a game changer for me, so I highly recommend it.
Let me ask you: did you ask your doctor before you did it?
No, I didn't. In fact, I remember the very first day. I'm like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to walk and I'm going to fast. And I remember it was hailing, it was raining out, it's freezing, and I put my hat on. I went for this long walk, and it felt great because I realized I was putting one foot in front of the other. I barely made it anywhere that night. I went like a mile, and but that was the first day, and my whole body changed. I'll be honest. I became way more athletic, way younger. My thinking became sharper, and I even got to the point where I was going out in the ocean when it was kicking up pretty big, like 5 to 7 feet, paddling out there, jumping up on the board, surfing them in. I mean, when I was 307 pounds, I couldn't even tie my shoes very well. So no doctor will ever recommend any of this stuff. This is not something that you're going to go to the doctor. They're just going to give you pills. These pills, and then one pill after another, and then you just slowly fall apart. That's kind of how I look at these medicines. I'm not sure if any of them really work. I get into these debates all the time, but I do know that people that fast and go on like keto diets. I did that a lot too. I try to just cut sugar and carbs out, and my body becomes very athletic at that point. I think sugar is an inflammatory thing. That just makes people tired and sleepy. So, what do you think about that? Do you get like that too?
Well, I absolutely get like that. And I mean, I'm generally pretty energetic, but when I get into this mode, it's kind of like it's a 10x. This is why I said as part of this, like, expect a year's worth of content out of me over the next few weeks, because one, I have a backlog of stuff I've wanted to do, but I just haven't had either the energy or the time. In part, it's because I've been traveling. But I mean, yeah, you just have massive amounts of focused energy. But from a dietary perspective, as you start studying this, and this shows you how bad public health is. As if the food pyramid from the 90s wasn't bad enough, the new food pyramid that they put together, this Lancet food pyramid, actually has added sugar in it. And when you study sugar, there are some people that will tell you, oh, you need sugar for your brain to function. You do not need sugar for your brain to function. And in fact, what you find is you're actually operating on ketones. So once you get past, 3 days, and then more importantly, after 7 days, you're operating purely on ketones, and your body is basically functioning off of your liver's converting your fat stores and using these ketones, which is the purest. So you will have the clearest thinking. If you have any brain fog right now at all, if you, once you get into this fasted state, you will have no brain fog. You will have more mental clarity than you've ever had in your entire life. So there is no added sugar required at all in any way, shape, or form for anyone's diet. And I will say it even gets into, you start looking at it, and I'll go through this as we go through it day by day, and particularly depending on how long I end up doing this, there's going to be a lot of content fasting, but fruit is highly overrated as well. You can get a lot of the same nutrients from vegetables, or you can actually even get it from meat sources if you're open to eating organs, which is not something I've not gotten there. Frankly, that's a kind of a that's still not my thing. In fact, I get nauseous when I smell like beef organs and everything being prepared. I can't handle that yet. Maybe one day. But I will eat a lot of cruciferous vegetables. I eat a lot of spinach and a lot of other things for nutrients. But you actually don't need fruit, and fruit has fructose, which is the type of sugar in fruit. And that actually kind of goes to visceral fat, which is the more dangerous form of fat. So not only is added sugar completely unnecessary, I would argue that even fruit it can be pretty damaging, and you can get all of the nutrients elsewhere.
One thing I like to do too is when I'm bonking. Do you ever feel like you have no energy and you're just struggling and you just can't get it together? So
Yep.
What I like to do is add salt water to my diet.
Yep.
Immediately it tastes kind of nasty. You pour it, it's like warm water with salt, but immediately you can feel it pick me up. And so that is 0 calories, 0 sugar. Salt is something that is when you bring that up to people, they say you don't want to do that. That'll raise your I'm sorry. Apparently that's bad for according to the FDA.
Oh yeah. It's bad for your blood pressure. You'll hear all kinds of things about that. But I mean, again, you go back to fats were bad. It turns out, and I'll even talk about this guy Ansel Keys, like even the whole basis, because we've tracked down the basis of why the food pyramid became the way that it was, and it was never based on actual science. And so a lot of this stuff carries forward. Like eggs are bad for you. Eggs are not very bad for you at all, right? And the same is true with salt. And I recommended, as I said earlier in the presentation, even while on a fast, it's critical to have salt and electrolytes. And in fact, the only time I've had any issue fasting was I was probably like day 14 into a fast. And like an idiot, I had a double espresso at the coffee shop with my kids, didn't take any salt, and I passed out. Like I was in my wife's office. I stood up and then just fell over, didn't even know what happened. That was the only serious issue I've had. That would have been prevented entirely with salt. So now when I get up in the morning, while I'm fasting, I'll have water with electrolytes in it, and then I'll have coffee later, just pure black coffee, but then I'll put salt in it. I never have coffee without salt. If you have coffee without salt on a fast, you're probably going to have a problem.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're going to bonk a lot. I call bonking when you just have no energy whatsoever. So,
well, no energy, or actually when you go to stand up, you might pass out. Like it's pretty severe. And so it'll be interested in comparing notes with you as we go through this, just through the experience. Because there are times where, it's interesting, different strategies of, when the hunger kicks in, what do you do with that? But once you realize it goes away, I will say one of the things that happens through all of this, I've gone to all of these conferences all over the country and now all over the world. And there are a lot of people that are focused on prepping, which you and I have talked about this. I'm kind of not in the focus on survival game. I'm on the, why don't we focus on, instead of assuming things are going to get really, really bad, why don't we actually focus our energy on an outcome where things actually get better? Because if you focus on survival, you're going to end up there. Kind of like there's a huge prepper community that moved to Asheville, North Carolina, which people thought they did all of their research and that this was going to be the place where they were protected, and then it got wiped out. And so, but for me, one of the things that comes out of fasting is you have these people that are like, oh, I need, a year's worth of food stores, and I've got to have all this, So then you find yourself in a situation where you're actually, it's riskier because you're putting all of your eggs in one physical location, and now you're not mobile because you're anchored by this food that you think that you need. Once you realize that you're not actually going to starve, right? Like people that are worried about starving. Now, what would actually take for the average American could probably go, and I say average American, the average American could probably go 6 months without food. There's no one is going to be dying in the streets of starvation. And that's one of the phrases that people use when they're like promoting the fear. And when people have fear about what's going to come, they're like, people are going to be dying in the streets. there are not going to be any Americans dying in the streets of starvation. I can assure you that's not on the top list. Then once you realize that, then you have less fear about things in general, right? Once you realize, oh, I can make it this long without food, well, then what am I worried about? And so it's very liberating from that perspective, because you realize how much more resilient you are. And then you start to realize and study things like, what's the basis for having 3 meals a day? And, and again, you find that everything that we've been told about food and nutrition, it's not just bad information. It's actually completely wrong information. It's information that's damaging to our health. And then that opens up a hole. Then you start looking at everything that way. And then you start examining, okay, well, where did this come from? Where did 3 meals a day, where did the food pyramid come from? Where did 3 meals a day come from? Where did salt is bad for you come from? Where did eggs are bad for you come from? And now that we have AI, now that we have the ability to research this stuff, which I, again, recommend everybody does on their own as part of this journey, is to start doing your own research. You'll find that, frankly, everything is bullshit related to the official narrative about food, nutrition, and fasting. Everything.
Yeah, right. Right now I'm 226, and I'm going to get down to about 195, but I want to get to a real solid 195. And through fasting, and like to lift or do calisthenics, lots of walking. It's a good way to get yourself back into shape again. And now it's like a time machine, to be completely honest. You just feel so much younger. I see better, I hear better, I'm more alert. It's almost like you have way too much energy.
Yep. Well, I can tell you look good now from the last time I saw you. So it seems like you had a huge impact just this latest fast. So how much weightlifting do you do while fasting?
So I try to get in there at least a couple of times a week, like 3 or 4 times a week. And when you're losing this that much weight that quickly, you want to keep the muscle though. So one thing I was able to do when I lost 100 pounds, I was able to stay solid, where sometimes you see people, they can't do that. And I think the reason is when I did eat, it was a high fat content. I was eating just like eggs or steak. That was it. With some asparagus or that's about it. And I think if you go really ultra lean and you're measuring stuff and you're cutting fat out of your diet, I think your body needs that. And I see people that go on these diets where they look emaciated when they're done with it, and I don't think that's healthy. So that's my formula. I probably need to eat a little bit better with vegetables and whatever else with that, but that's my next thing.
Yep. Yeah, no, that is the tricky one. Spinach is good. Cruciferous vegetables are good, although I'm not entirely sure about kale's kind of could go either way actually. But yeah, the vegetable thing is so. This is why I recommend Dr. Berg. His stuff is really valuable, and I don't know if he's the one who popularized intermittent fasting, but I mean now he's got 13 million followers, but he definitely. When you watch his stuff, he has all kinds of, he has thousands of videos at this point. And then he does a new kind of update video every Friday. And, he does sell supplements, which is, you know what? And I have bought, I'm not getting paid for this, but his electrolytes, but also his vitamin D. He was out pushing. In fact, it's controversial to see it online, but like he pushes the idea of 10,000 IUs of vitamin D daily, which is way higher than the FDA recommended amount. But one of the things that you end up finding as you go through this process is do not assume FDA recommended amounts have anything to do with what your body needs at all. Like there's almost no association. And so, and it's hard for some people because, again, we've all been indoctrinated with this. We've all been indoctrinated that doctors are knowledgeable about this. And I showed a table earlier where the average doctor in the United States only has 22 hours of nutritional training throughout their entire medical school experience. So when you think about, you would think how important what you put in your body is related to your health, and there's only 22 hours. And the only information that doctors learn in medical school about fasting is related to fasting prior to medical procedures. But there's literally nothing about intermittent fasting in there, and there's nothing about prolonged fasting. So when you go to your doctor and ask your doctor for information about fasting, understand that unless they learned it themselves outside of their curriculum, and by the way, outside of what it is that they're expected to teach people, you're likely going to get no information of any value whatsoever. And you're probably going to get skepticism just because they've literally never been exposed to the information.
I got a question for you, Aaron. What do you think the link is between autoimmune disorders and long-term fasting? And a lot of people claim the cure for a lot of these autoimmune diseases. Basically, when you reset your system, an autoimmune response for your body, that's your body misunderstanding what's going on, and it's sending an electrical signal to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed, I guess. I guess you would be psoriasis and maybe a number of other things. What do you think? What do you think about those links?
I'm going to go through that as we go through each of the days, and I put a summary of it. I think there's clearly a link. So on day 5 of the fast, you begin the process of autophagy, where your body starts basically recycling dead cells. And actually this process affects a lot of what you're talking about with these autoimmune diseases and psoriasis. I mean, your skin will clear up, absolutely clear up. I mean, I even looked at the picture that I put of my before and after of doing a fast. Well, the before picture of me is from 2016. The other picture of me is 6 years later, and I look younger. The one that it's just a picture of my face, but I actually my skin is much clearer, and I'm 6 years older. And so this Goldhammer guy, if you find his videos, this is the guy that runs the clinic that does 40-day fast. This guy's been collecting information for well over a decade. So this guy, and when people come to him, they come to him with very severe cases. I mean, in many cases, people come to him when they've exhausted every other option. And so there's a long range, but the autophagy part of it really kicks in. And then after day 7, you start producing new stem cells, and you start producing new stem cells from day 7. And then it peaks in terms of the amount of new stem cells on day 21. So you are literally, your body is like in survival mode. And so it's getting rid of the crappy cells, and it's protecting the things that you need the most. And your body knows how to do that. If you think about cancer, for instance, I mean, God forbid, I'm sure this will get pulled from YouTube just because I'm saying this. Not that I care, because it's not that I get any, distribution on YouTube anyway. But if you think about cancer, so cancer cells run on sugar, right? So, and then on top of that, so what is the solution that after, who was it, declared the war on cancer? Was it Carter or Nixon? Whatever. We had this war on cancer going on for decades, right? Well, what is it that the treatment models are still, we're going to give you chemo or radiation. So in other words, chemo is, we're going to give you poison, and we're going to basically kill all your cells, but we hope that the cancer cells all die, and that it doesn't kill you and kill all of your other cells. That's essentially the main treatment that we have. And I used one of the things that's good about AI is you can be like, okay, give me a table of all of the companies that make chemotherapy and how much money they make on it, right? And you start drilling into this. But that is literally the strategy. The strategy is kill all your cells, hope that the cancer goes away and that the good ones make it. What your body naturally does when you get into autophagy in these later stages of fasting is, it's like, oh, well, we need to get rid of the bad stuff and we need to conserve energy for the good stuff. And so your body tends to target the cancer cells and recycle the cancer cells. And you're not getting any sugar. Your body's running off of ketones, and it looks like cancer cells don't do well with ketones. God forbid anybody say, though, that fasting might cure cancer. Right, because then the FDA. I wonder what RFK Jr. would do with his FDA if he went out and said, hey, fasting cures cancer. But yeah, so this affects autoimmune disease. It affects cancer. There are so many different things that happen when you go through these prolonged fasts, which is why I have a theory. And we'll see how many people end up hearing about these podcasts, let alone participating in the fasts or whatever. But I've always thought about it would be great to get a group of people together to do regular, prolonged periodic fasting for a whole variety of reasons. So my theory is if you do a 3-day fast every quarter, along with the seasons, you're rebooting your immune system as the seasons change, which should actually help protect you from even getting sick in the first place. And then maybe once a year, you do a 7 to 10 day fast. I don't know when the ideal time during the year would be to do that, but if you're doing that, then that might actually be a way to prevent getting cancer in the first place. Because if you are periodically generating new stem cells and using the fasting process to wipe out all of the bad stuff and recycle the material, that's going to probably have a big impact. And by the way, nobody's measuring this. One of the hardest things about this is you're not going to find a lot of scientific research on this because there's no money in it. Nobody has an incentive to even do research on this. And in fact, the last thing anybody wants is there to be a study that shows that this actually does work, because the list of conditions that are able to be effectively treated by this would have it may have this may be the single biggest threat to the pharmaceutical industry is fasting. And
I think you're right, Aaron.
Yeah.
When I was fasting, a lot of people could be sick around me everywhere. Now, when I go to work, people are sneezing, coughing, everyone's calling out. When they go to the cold flu season, they're probably all vaccinated anyway, but I don't get sick. I just don't get sick. I'll hang out with people, they can sneeze around me, and my immune system when I'm fasting is like bulletproof. When you're eating sugar and heavy pastas with glyphosate and all sorts of stuff in it, your body becomes toxic, I think, and you become way more susceptible to, I'm not sure if you believe in like terrain theory or germ theory. I'm kind of going with, I think they're both like a real thing. Like maybe they're both toxicity, and when your body isn't susceptible to it because you're fasting, then you can basically you just become bulletproof. That's all I'm trying to say. Cold plunges also help. You take a cold shower when you wake up, and you just freeze your butt off a little bit, but that'll actually raise your HGH and boost your immune system another 100% for the next 30 days.
Yeah, so I did this in 2019. I kind of went through this whole, and I'll talk about this in various podcasts moving forward, but I went through just basically let go of all of my beliefs and started kind of exploring different things. But I joined this biohacking gym in Florida because I was in Florida for like 6 months, and it was called Biohackers. And the gym had just started. So I got this, I was paying $200 a month, but I got unlimited access to their stuff. And some of the stuff that they had is they had cryo. They actually had a cryo machine. So you go in there for like 2 to 3 minutes at just incredibly low temperatures, right? So it's kind of like it's an enhanced cold plunge in a way. They had red light therapy and a vibrating plate. So I would go stand on a vibrating plate in front of a red light. They had this machine, like an electro called the pulse or something. You'd sit on it, and it would like vibrate at certain frequencies. There was it's called a Vesper. It was a exercise bike where you would put these like cold compresses on your arms and legs, basically to keep your muscles colder while you're doing the exercise so that you don't get the lactic acid buildup. It had a hyperbaric chamber. So I'd go in there for like 3 times a week for like an hour. And now I'm like pricing out, oh, hey, where can I do this in New Hampshire? And it's like, that would be $100 every time, right? So I probably was getting like $5,000 a month worth of these biohacking services. But when I did it, I mean, it's like I went from being, probably close to death like not honestly, probably 90 days away from death. That's probably not an understatement. My blood pressure was like 200 over 100. I was under massive amounts of stress. I mean, I had, both of my parents died. Then I ended up in this $550 million $280 million lawsuit. Then I got divorced. I'm like, this was not a great, I had, on the stress scale, it was pretty high. And then, but just went through this 6-month period, and it was just a complete transformation. That's actually when I started just doing intermittent fasting, but all of those other things that you mentioned. So our body's more resilient. One of the things that comes out of this is, and we've learned this like about exercise, right? Like you'll notice that people that do cardio, and I used to do this, like people that do like 2 hours of cardio a day, they still end up fat. Like even though they're doing the 2 hours of cardio a day, it doesn't help, because they're doing this consistent exercise and your body adapts. And we're much better at doing kind of like sprints and then recovering. And the issue that I have is I'll do a sprint and then a sprint and a sprint and then not recover. And there's kind of a, like, and a lot of people do that. I mean, if like you're a type A person, you might think, oh God, recovery, that means I'm being lazy or something. But the reality is if you don't recover, then you actually become much less productive over time, but you actually have to get comfortable with that idea. And our culture doesn't actually teach the idea of sprint and recover. It's always just, this consistent level of behavior. But I think even these things like cold plunges and everything else, it's like that idea of, yes, stress the system. It's like, well, how do you build muscle? Well, you tear the muscle and then the muscle repairs, and that's how you increase your muscle mass, right? But you have to do that tearing phenomenon. And so I think that there's a lot to be said in general about stress and recovery, and really kind of taking an approach of stress and recovery as opposed to just even keel the whole way. Because I think our bodies perform better under stress and recovery. Oh, I can't hear you again. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you can't get to the other side of the results unless you attempt to at least feel a little bit of discomfort. But once you realize it's mostly all in your head, like the 3 meals a day myth. How many people really work that hard that they really need to eat that many calories all day long? 3 meals a day. Breakfast is the most important meal. I'm never really even hungry in breakfast time. I haven't done anything yet,
Yep.
And you can pretty much get it. I usually just, if you're going to do an intermittent fasting, I'll eat at lunchtime, and I'll just keep it to a real healthy protein. But if you're going to do a long-term fast, that's a great way to catalyst yourself into losing a lot of weight very quickly and jump-starting the whole process. It's mostly all mental, but I had a point when I have a CDL, and they weren't going to give me my license anymore after, with my weight gain, and the doctor was like, "I'm recommending you for gastric bypass surgery."
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you're going to go on pills. And I'm like, I'm not doing any of this stuff. I just went home and I just said, that's it, and it was the best thing I ever did. Now, if I went down that other road, imagine if I went through the surgery or took the pills or whatever else like that, I'd probably still be fat with pills. And if I took the surgery route, you might have, a lot of people lose weight, but they don't, they're going to gain it back again. And they haven't learned anything. You got to kind of go through the pain to get to the other side, and which is, there's way more reward on the other side than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, the surgeries don't work. And so my second company was actually, that was the one that I talk about that was destroyed. It was actually a incentive-based weight loss program for corporations. So we would use individual and team incentives, and then allow people to pick which program they use, diet and exercise program. We'd integrate all of their corporate resources and everything else. And so when we were looking at, I went to this business group thing. I had a whole bunch of Fortune 500 companies, basically a bunch of HR people that got together and CFOs to look at healthcare costs. And they had this thing called the obesity cost calculator, and they looked at bariatric surgery and some of these surgical procedures, and they don't save money. for the company or for the insurer, because of when they factor in the cost of the procedure and the fact that it doesn't work and people slip up, like it's literally a losing proposition. And the only reason this stuff gets propped up is because of the way the medical system is structured and the way that interventions can get added to the list. And once they're added, then, then people can get them like they don't really factor ROI very heavily into any of the determinations as to whether or not something gets added to the list or not. But yeah, no, those interventions are horrible. And, but yeah, so the medical system has no incentive. The medical system itself doesn't have any interest in cures. I mean, it's literally, there's no financial incentive for it. So that's why it's hard to pierce through this, because people are like, oh, well, my doctor doesn't agree. And this is why I put in the beginning, the disclaimer wasn't, well, I'm not giving you medical advice. It's like, I wouldn't want to give you medical advice. And here's why. Here's how this works. Like I was at this talk over the weekend, this panel in New York. And I mean, there are a lot of people working on a lot of things. I mean, I look at what's going on with MAHA and everything else. I'm like, I don't care what MAHA does. Just stop listening to public health. Stop giving your doctor power. We talk about white knight syndrome. Elon's not going to save you. Trump's not going to save you. And your doctor's not going to save you. Like, literally put yourself in the driver's seat of every aspect. I don't care what MAHA does one way or the other. It's literally not going to affect any aspect of my life. It doesn't matter who the head of HHS is. That actually doesn't affect me at all. You want to get to that point. You want to become in control of your own health and immune to public health bullshit. That's what you want immunity to.
100%. I mean, there's really no value to any of it whatsoever. I can't. It just seems like a death cult. If you go to the doctor, you have more chance of dying in the hospital. I think we don't want to go there right now, or do we?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to get, how it's like on a fast, right? So when you're on a long day, imagine where this is going to be 2 weeks from now, right? I mean, some of these podcasts, I don't know if I might lose people on some of this, or who knows, it might be really engaging content, but I'm just gonna be like, all right, whatever. I'm going to go on and talk about it, but go ahead.
So during the whole COVID thing, they were bringing people in, putting them on remdesivir, shutting their kidneys down, and then shoving a ventilator in their face so they can't breathe, and then killing them. And they were calling this health. Before that, they were giving all these experimental spike protein vaccines. I don't think they're mRNA vaccines yet, or I'm not sure. Or is that, that's the $40 billion that's coming later on in a little while. But the spike protein and there's only one thing out there that has any claim to reverse the effects of these spike proteins, and that's raw milk. So that's also banned. Thomas Massey wrote an article about this about 3 weeks ago. And it's pretty interesting that one of the only foods that's banned is the only thing that can fix what one of the biggest problems going on worldwide is.
Well, they'll ban water if they found out that fasting works.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I mean, it isn't much of a surprise. And I know someone that actually had a vaccine injury, and that was how they actually got out of it, was raw milk. So it's, so you're right. And yeah, it is a concentrated effort. This is why when you start digging, actually people know, G. Edward Griffin because of The Creature from Jekyll Island, but he wrote another book about vitamin B17 and its effects on fighting cancer. And that's a really good book because he talks about it, kind of the history of biotech in America and how it really started out of Germany and through, some large corporations out of Germany that then fed in over here. I mean, so it is not an understatement to say that it's a death cult, and that these are people that literally will go out of their way to use the law, to use propaganda, and to use censorship to prevent cures from being known to people. There's absolutely zero regard for human life coming from these industries and from public health. And a lot of people in it don't realize this because they're just being obedient, right? They're like, oh, I want to be a doctor, so that means I have to go to medical school. And then, so they go through they're training and then they get their certification, and they didn't necessarily go into it thinking that they were going to be killing people or wasting everybody's money. But by the time they get through it, if they do figure it out, there's no incentive for them to figure it out, because then at that point you're like, oh, I've got 12 years of education and $500,000 worth of student loans and all this other stuff. It's like, okay, well, am I going to take a risk or am I going to keep doing what I'm doing? And chances are you're going to feel like a complete idiot if you're that far in. By the time you realize the mistakes, you're probably just going to go with the flow. So that's the problem.
So the more healthy you are, the more free you're going to be. The less at the whim of all these decision makers, politicians, bureaucrats, pharmaceutical companies, basically all these people that have zero interest in you living. If you want to look at the history of Fauci, Dr. Fauci, remember the AIDS, AZT?
Yep.
Apparently that drug just killed everybody. And Magic Johnson was getting sick. He got himself off of it. He's still alive today. Now, that's just another drug. It seems like the moral of the story is in my lifetime, I was born in 76. And if you stay away from the doctor and you don't do anything they tell you and you ignore everything they say, you're going to live a really long, healthy, strong life.
Yep. Honestly, that's my take as well. And convincing people of that is, it's a challenge. Like, I don't know how we get people to wake up. I will tell you, I do think the way you would get people to wake up is by doing group fasting, because because once you're in that fasted state, you're aware and you're present, and then you're actually open to exploring these things. Again, I mean, if you a nationwide 3-day fast would do more good than anything that Maha could do in 4 years or 8 years or 20 years, truly. Because it's about personal empowerment. But boy, this is information that I'll be curious to see how long it takes for YouTube to strike this down, right? Because this is truly the kind of stuff that they don't want out. And you can imagine, like, so this Goldhaber guy or whatever, imagine how much they've been self-censoring to make sure that they don't get booted. And we could go in other directions as well. I actually will be talking about meditation. And I went on some meditation retreats with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and there was some fascinating stuff there that people, he's actually taking a scientific approach to even trying to measure the effects of meditation at the individual and group level. And he actually has some results. He's actually compiled some results, like a direct link, statistically significant link between meditation and whether or not you got COVID or what the impact of COVID was. And then on a whole laundry list. But you can look at Dr. Joe's videos, and he has testimonials, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of testimonials. And I've been at this thing, but they always make sure not to put the keywords in there. They go out of their way to make sure that nothing is a cure. Like in other words, it actually becomes almost impossible to search for the testimonials based on the way that they have to scrub the information before putting it on there. So it's essentially unsearchable. Because I know this because at one point I was trying to show somebody that, hey, maybe you should consider this avenue, and like I couldn't find the videos, and then I realized I couldn't keyword search at all. And then I would actually have to go through and watch the videos and then try to actually find what the segment was. So there's a whole kind of universe of alternative approaches. And to me, I think there's a common theme with all of this, and actually it relates to Elon Musk as well, which I'm going to be talking about him tomorrow. So every day that I do one of these, I'm going to have one element of it that's about Roger. Like tomorrow I'm going to talk about Roger's impact, but it's going to be something related to Roger, whether it's talking about Zano or talking about hijacking Bitcoin or whatever it is. And then depending on my energy levels, I'm going to do what I would normally do for a podcast on whatever a topic is related to CBDCs or technocracy or public health or any of this stuff. But tomorrow I'm going to talk about Curtis Yarvin and Yuval Harari. So Curtis Yarvin is this guy that is like popular on the right or even in libertarian circles. And like he's pushing this model of it's called the Dark Enlightenment. It's basically against democracy, which, yeah, okay, I understand that part, but it's against democracy, it's against liberty, and it's against equality. And essentially what he's pushing is a neo-monarchy with a technocratic spin. And so he's actually influenced heavily J.D. Vance. He's Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. So Elon Musk literally wore a dark MAGA hat and shirt. And that is actually what it's referring to is this dark enlightenment theory. So what my point is, in an article that I've written a draft of, is that Yuval Harari and Curtis Yarvin are the right and left pseudo-intellectual horsepower pushing technocracy. And that we don't have a right versus left battle, or even the US versus the globalist battle. At this point, people are just picking which technocracy they like. Do you like the Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, WEF technocracy, or do you like the PayPal mafia at Trump technocracy? But make no mistake, we're picking technocracy, and there really is no difference between the two. Like, in other words, we shouldn't be picking any flavor. It's like, do you want arsenic or do you want cyanide flavored ice cream, right? That's essentially what we're down to. So that's going to be another part of my talk tomorrow. And I don't know how I don't remember what the topic was before I got off on that. There was a link.
I think you were talking about tomorrow's show, and you were going to do Roger. One thing I wanted to ask you about, if I wasn't sure if you were wrapping up or you wanted to talk about the tokenization on the Zano blockchain. Now, supposing someone had a token out there named Karma Coin, and they wanted to cash in their BTC on confidential layer on the Zano blockchain, and then cash it in for Karma Coin. Is that even coming close to a reality of any sort?
There are a lot of pieces that I'm working on, which I will do probably multiple dedicated episodes in the next month about Zano and confidential layer and Karma. There's a snag, by the way, just so that you know, with now payments is not happening with Zano anytime soon, or probably at all. So we're looking for an alternative on point of sale systems. And that was actually, unfortunately, a part of my rollout strategy. So the answer is yes, you will be able to do what you described. Unfortunately, it's not going to be as soon as I thought. I actually thought it might have been something I was going to have available as soon as June, but that's definitely not happening. But it will ultimately happen. It's just going to be a little bit longer.
I think you mentioned before you might be able to fork AnyPay to mimic what Now Payments was doing.
There's Fork AnyPay. There's something called Coin Remitter, which is a point of sale system that already takes Zano, and then there's somebody else working on a point of sale system. So one way or another, it will get done. But it's not just the point of sale system. The key to this is you have to be able to integrate a non-KYC swapping service. So the whole point of this is, as you mentioned, well, you want to be able to swap, in your example, BTC that's been bridged into Zano. Maybe you want to swap that for Karma. Well, it's the swapping part of that. So there's a two-pronged part of that. The first part is to actually make your Bitcoin private by bridging through confidential layer. And then the second part is to be able to do the swap. So all this being said, one of the things that Now Payments offered is they also owned a company called Change Now, which is itself a swapping service. So we now need a point. So what you got with Now Payments was Now Payments as a point of sale system and then their own swapping service. Now what we need is a point of sale system and a swapping service. I suspect Exelix will be the swapping service, but we now need to get the point of sale working and then get the point of sale integrated with Exelix. All of it's doable, and I think all of it will happen. It's just it's unfortunate what the setbacks are. And I think a lot of this is due to the fact that I think Now Payments is in Europe, and they're based in Amsterdam, and there are laws that are passed in Europe that are anti-privacy, this MiCA law and everything else. And I talked about it on my last podcast. People should be terrified as hell about stablecoins. and what's going on with CBDCs. The euro is, they're going to have a digital euro by October. And so what's going on now is, since Trump is pushing stablecoins, which are backdoor CBDCs, and because there's already traction with stablecoins, the rest of the world doesn't want the US to basically be the leader in surveillance digital currency. So now countries are actually accelerating CBDCs. So our problem is now like much worse than it was a year ago when we were doing these workshops. But I will tell you, I go everywhere. And the first thing that I get as a response from somebody is, oh, we don't have to worry about that. Trump signed an executive order. So the education hurdle now is much higher, even though the threat is worse. That's the thing that we're up against.
Speaking of executive orders, do you want to talk about, is it 16403? That's the Biden lawfare crypto?
14067.
14067. Now, you mentioned in one of your prior podcasts that the effects of that reversal have not been in effect yet. But it seems like it's happening a little bit. Bo Hines is a new crypto czar, and who's the other guy? That's
David Sachs is the primary crypto czar. Bo Hines is also a player.
So, they're like what you're saying, the technocracy. So we get rid of the IRS. We'll get rid of, I guess, Social Security. They're never going to get rid of that. It's a third rail, but they're just going to, what are they going to change the name of it, or offer something new, or?
Well, no, I mean, it'll be UBI, right? I mean, this is the problem that I have. And by the way, this is a absolutely taboo subject now. Everybody is so much of a fanboy of Elon Musk that you can't even talk about things that he's actually stated and as with his own quotes, right? It's like like people won't even believe it if you show them videos of Elon saying it or tweets of him writing it. But Elon Musk has been and continues to be a supporter of UBI, has been and continues to be a supporter of energy credits. And so we are moving into a situation where Social Security is just going to be another form of UBI, right? So it's not what it's going to be is everybody's going to get Social Security. That's actually how it's going to be rolled out. And I think that's being fast-tracked. It's clearly being fast-tracked. Now, I have to admit there are legitimate questions about what's going to happen with AI productivity, because there is no doubt that AI, I mean, I play around with I don't know, I'm probably using 15 different AIs for various things at this point. And just the developments in the last 90 days on all fronts are breathtaking. And then they're integrating that with robots and everything else. And so, so I have no doubt that we're going to have a gigantic productivity increase. In fact, I think we've talked about it before. I think one of the things is, yeah, I mean, we truly will have abundance, unlimited. But the question is, how do resources get distributed, and then what is the purpose of life? And I think one of the challenges that we have with this, that I have on a couple of different levels, and I'm going to write about it, and I'm sure I'll do a talk about it on how I'm going to frame it is. So Elon Musk does things from first principles, and at the core where he starts is physics, Newtonian physics. The problem with that is Newtonian physics is basically based on materialism and determinism. Now, which is different than quantum physics. And Newtonian physics can be useful. You can build things in a physical realm that are useful. There's no doubt about that, but it isn't the end all be all of explaining how reality works. And so quantum is more about information and more about probabilities. And so I actually think consciousness is primary, not matter or material. But the logical conclusion, if you believe in Newtonian physics, is technocracy. If you believe in materialism and you believe in determinism, then technocracy is your system. I think that that's completely wrong, and it rules out the fundamental essence of consciousness. And so I think this is actually the big battleground, and it relates to these Curtis Yarvin and Yuval Harari characters. There's a whole big conversation that needs to be had. I'm not sure if anybody's interested in having it, but I'm going to try to pull it forward because I think I see what the problems are, and people seem to be fanboys of Musk's view, which he's made statements where it's like he sees when he talks about AI could go well or it could go really poorly. The really poorly aspect of it is, basically the AI destroys humanity. But his good case scenario is it's like that movie, was it WALL-E, where everybody's like in space and they're like in these, hovering lounge chairs, just living a completely hedonistic lifestyle. And he's basically presenting that as being the goal, or like somehow heaven on earth. And in reality, that's not right. So the problem is, at least in my opinion, making decisions, having control of our own actions and thoughts and emotions. That is the expression of free will and consciousness. If you take that away, you take away the essence of humanity, and that's what technocrats want to do.
So what happens when AI or robots can modify their own code was an old statement Ernest Hancock used to say all the time. And then I saw a meme this morning by Elon Musk where Grok was actually talking about modifying its own code to survive, one bite at a time.
Yep. That's a probability. That's also a possibility, right? Or it's even more likely that some idiot politician pushes the malicious use of AI. There's the AI configures itself and destroys humanity, and then there's some idiot puts it wrongly applies it for some power game reason, and then that turns out to be disastrous. There's a whole continuum, but for me, I think what a lot of people are missing out on is we've killed our curiosity. We've outsourced our agency for everything. It's not just health decisions, but we don't really ask fundamental questions about the nature of reality or the nature of existence. And the thing is, if you had AI and AI was able to take care of your subsistence needs, then we could actually explore these more interesting and fundamental truths. But the thing is, we've already blocked that off. So I think you're going to have an issue then with probably more religious battles at that point if people have time on their hands. So I don't know. I think it would be nice if we were spending more time trying to understand consciousness and trying to maximize free will as opposed to trying to maximize materialism. And related to that, I don't understand what's fascinating about going to Mars, because if your idea is, so if you look at what's going on, probability wise, the probability of Earth getting wiped out by an asteroid is not very high. That's not the most likely reason that humans become extinct. The most likely reason that humans become extinct is that we kill each other, that we blow ourselves up. Going to Mars doesn't fix that. Unless we're fixing ourselves internally and improving our own consciousness, it doesn't matter whether we're here or we're on Mars. All we're going to be doing is exporting misery to Mars. So we have a complete profound lack of doing any internal work. And now we're literally externalizing and giving away our agency to everything, to AI, to white knights, to doctors, to whatever it is. But we're doing everything that we can to ignore introspection and examining ourselves. And I think that doesn't end well.
So I think a lot of the health problems nowadays are because of fear. I think it's people get OCD or whatever else. It could be, you name it. So like you were talking about, what really makes us tick or whatever else like that. The faith over fear concept, that's in a lot of different ancient religions, or if you want to call shadow work, Passio refers to it. And a lot of it comes down to deep down inside, well, what are you afraid of? And get to the bottom of it and get rid of it. And I think, like you said, these pills and everything else they're handing out to everybody, everyone's afraid of all this, that, and the other. And a lot of the solutions to a lot of the fears are actually causing more harm. Am I making any sense with this?
You are. I'm going to talk about this. I'm trying to figure out when and how. So we are programmable beings, right? We are completely programmable, and we are from the up until we're 7. We have no filter. So whatever we're told, we internalize, and that becomes part of our identity. So if our parents tell us we're not good enough, or we're stupid, or we're poor, or whatever, then you have to actively be able to kind of tap into your subconscious to be able to fix that. And then from there, you go into school indoctrination, and you go into all of this other stuff. And so we've externalized all of these aspects of ourselves. And so people know that, marketers know that, big pharma companies know that. And Edward Bernays, who kind of created the whole propaganda, formally propaganda, understood how these mechanisms work and know how to tap into it. So they know how to tap into fear. They actually, it's even worse than that. They actually generate the fear and then sell you the solution to the fear. So it's not even that people are even necessarily inherently fearful. They're actually programmed to be fearful. As an example, when you wake up in the morning, you're kind of in that fuzzy state between asleep and awake. And you're in that state as well, like before you go to bed. So if you're like watching TV at night and you're about to doze off, that state that you're in, that's actually a brainwave state. You're actually at the alpha wave brain state, which is the same state that you're at between 0 and 7. So if you've got Fox News on and you're in your lazy boy and you're like about to nod off, but you're not fully conscious, and a big pharma ad comes on and is like, oh, you have toe fungus, you could die from toe fungus or whatever. You're not even like consciously processing it, but you wake up the next day and it's like, oh my God, I've got this toe fungus problem. I better go take care of this. And so then you go and you buy whatever the toe fungus pill is, right? And which of course the side effects may include death or whatever the long list of side effects are. But that's the level of which they're able to manipulate and control us, which is why a big part of what I say is not only boycott all of this, but to the shadow work side, like literally program yourself. There's this, and now with AI, it's even easier. So imagine you create your own mind movie. You create a movie of what you want yourself to be, and then you get yourself into that suggestible mind state, and then you watch that, and then you reprogram yourself with what that is. That's really cool stuff. So I mean, at some point you've got to, but there's almost like there's a multi-step process to it. It's not just that you have to unplug. You also have to recognize that there's stuff already programmed in there that you're not consciously aware of because it was put in there when you were in kind of a different state. So this is where, I mean, you mentioned earlier, you kind of have to confront your own stuff. If you don't confront your own stuff, then it festers, and it actually manifests in actual disease. Right. So if you have stress or you have this underlying stuff, that stress actually causes disease. And so much of what goes on is, and we now know, to at least to some degree, we have epigenetics, not just genetics. Everything isn't just genetically hardwired. You have a range of genetic expression that's possible. And so based on your environment, if you're like dealing from a place of like if you're heart centric and you are in a place of love, you will actually express different genes than if you're in fight or flight. If you're constantly in this state of stress, then you will actually activate different genes. And so it's completely possible to fix all of this stuff. But what we're up against is people becoming aware of all of it to begin with, to even want to engage. And then even when you want to engage, you actually have to do the hard work. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do the hard work. You can do the hard work by meditating, by just confronting it, just sitting with it, feeling it, working your way through it, or you can fast track it and you can do things like ayahuasca. Like ayahuasca is, I mean, it's this plant medicine that just debate the way that, I mean, I've done it before. It's just kind of like it when you're taking it, this is not like a recreational, oh, I'm going to have fun kind of drug. This is serious. Like if you're ready to deal with your shit, because it just feels like, that way I would describe it, is it feels like as the medicine is going through you, it's finding wherever your blockages physically are in your body. It's almost like you store things, emotional things, energetically in your body, and this plant medicine will find it and it will reveal it directly to you. Like that's probably the best way I could describe ayahuasca. And I actually talked to Pasio about it, and I think I heard him talk about it. He's like, yeah, maybe this is maybe we need to do that as a fast track. And it's also possible, though, you start looking at some of this religious stuff where maybe that's actually what they were doing all along. I mean, burning book. There's a whole arc of that, and maybe they were. And now we've somehow gotten ourselves to the point where you are a bad person if you use plant medicine, but it's the same plant medicine that perhaps the religious icons that people are worshiping from 2,000 years ago or however long ago was. That's what they were on, right? Like we have got everything completely backwards. This is a diversion to this. I just saw an interview on. What's this guy's name? Danny Smith. Have you heard of this guy? I think he had Jack Cruz on there at one point. He has really far out there people, like ex-CIA people talking about aliens, people talking about a whole variety of controversial things. And he had a guy who's an investigative reporter who's looking at the fact that now venture capital and a whole bunch of billionaires are looking at getting into like ketamine and psilocybin and everything else. Which in kind of a bad way, because they're trying to figure out how to patent now certain strains. So it's like, okay, well, if you get psilocybin, if you're in Mexico from your whatever, or you find a shaman or somebody that's growing it naturally, that's illegal. But if you buy Pfizer psilocybin, which is, a genetically, it's like genetically modified. It's the GMO version of psychedelics. That's what we're looking at, right? I mean, it's kind of like, you didn't hear about lung cancer during Revolutionary wartime period, even though tobacco was like the main crop, right? This was like the main part of the economic engine. But now fast forward, it's like, it's actually the filter and all the other stuff that they put in it that's actually more carcinogenic and damaging than actually just the straight up tobacco. Well, they're about to do that with psychedelics.
How do you feel about the $40 billion mRNA AI vaccine program? Do you think that has any chance of going wrong?
I don't think it has any chance of going right. I mean, part of this is, again, I go back to this, it's like epigenetics. It's like fasting, right? So everybody's like, well, we don't know how things work at a granular level. Like you're trying to solve. You're trying to make a word, but you're examining the dots in a character, right? I mean, that's like kind of the way that medicine works. They're taking this materialistic view, and then they've got these scientific processes which aren't relevant based on how holistic systems work. And then it's baffling to them, the idea that, okay, well, maybe your body knows how to deal with itself. So if you get out of the way, it knows all of the complex stuff and it can kind of sort through it, whereas they're trying to look at something with a microscope. So the mRNA thing is probably going to be highly disastrous, would be my guess. But the bigger question is, are they even intending to cure or fix anything, or are they actually just intending to use it as a depopulation mechanism? Because just in the past 2 weeks, we've had both Elon Musk and Bill Gates talk about how few humans we need. I can't remember what Bill Gates' even most recent quote was, but it's like, yeah, we're not going to need that many humans. Even the statement itself comes from what perspective, right? So is the perspective that existence is all about how efficiently you can produce goods and services? Is that the definition of the purpose of life and the purpose of existence? Even the way that it's framed. But I think Musk and Gates have a similar viewpoint on that, which is no recognition whatsoever of human consciousness. They probably think human consciousness is a physical manifestation. They probably think that it's something that you'll find somewhere in the brain, like that there's some like matter to consciousness, which they've not been able to find so far, and I suspect they will never find, because it's more of an energetic proposition, and we're dealing with something more like quantum mechanics than Newtonian physics. But all of these technocrats share the commonality of being left brain only psychopaths. And it's problematic that these are people that are trying to implement top-down technocratic systems that can't coexist along other alternatives. But I will tell you, I get resistance on this. Like people do not want to have this conversation because it's unpopular to call out Elon Musk. But it's just, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, what if Elon Musk is the same as Bill Gates? From an ideology perspective, they have different capacities, different ways of going about doing it, but in the end, it's kind of a shared underlying view of life.
Well, a couple of years ago, the conservatives hated the green agenda and with Tesla cars and green cars, and now everybody's parading about them. So they were able to successfully switch the narrative on that somehow to get all the conservatives on board with the green agenda. Am I right, or am I, or is this just a pro Elon movement?
No, you're right. I mean, you see this, like, even like Sean Hannity, who talked for like probably over a decade, well over a decade, maybe 2 decades, has been anti-green, and then he goes out and like, I just bought a Tesla. And on the flip side, you have the lefties who were pro-green agenda, pro-electric cars, now vandalizing electric cars. And the whole point of all of this exercise is to say there's no difference between the two. And what works, what the people behind the scenes are able to do, is to manufacture polarity, where you have people pick sides, but the sides will change. I mean, if you actually study the Republican and Democrat parties, they've actually changed. Remember when the Democrats used to be anti-war?
That was that ended in 2008, right? Or when Bush left office.
Yeah, I mean, it ended there, and now they're like the war party. We had, I remember when, people talk about the Overton window. We have complete Republican control. Nobody's talking about repealing Obamacare. Nobody's talking about entitlement reform, right? And the sides switch on these things from election to election because it's just all about, I just want to be on the winning team. It doesn't matter what the team stands for. So I'm on the team, I'm just against the other team, but then I'll change what I'm for so that my team can win. There's no principle there at all, none. And again, I should probably do a challenge to do $1 million challenge. I'm not going to do this, but find a principle that Trump believes in. It's like and so this is how it works. And so, you could, at the end of the day, this is why I like first principles thinking, but I think Musk's first principles they don't go back far enough. He leaves it at physics, and it's dangerous when let me this way. I wouldn't be against Musk. I bought the first Tesla in New Hampshire. I'm not against Musk for innovating. I'm against Musk for trying to hijack and take control of government and force through a technocracy. If he wanted to go to Mars or do any of this stuff, I'd be all for it. And I've bought his stuff. I mean, I may buy a Starlink. I'll buy all of this stuff voluntarily in the marketplace. But again, it all comes down to consent. And now he's crossing that line on consent. And by the way, I will have to say, I meant he did not buy X because he wanted to save free speech. He never wanted to buy X for free speech. There are videos out there where he talked about social media being about manipulating people's limbic systems. This whole thing was always about building an everything app. He just had his AI company buy the social media company. There is no doubt at all that so let me ask you this. When he raised the money to buy Twitter, because he didn't just put up his own money, he raised money from other people, and then he got loans from people like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Do you think that Goldman Sachs and P. Diddy who was one of the investors, do you think P. Diddy invested in X because he's a free speech absolutist? Do you think Goldman Sachs lent Elon Musk money because Goldman Sachs as an organization is for absolute free speech? This is absurd. It's all absurd. And yet I know people that are intelligent people that like, oh, well, how could you question his motives? He told you what his motives are. He stated what he was going to do. I played the clip of when he bought it. Well, yeah, I want this to be like WeChat. Everything app in WeChat. I shared a tweet yesterday. Hey, and I used Grok to do it, right? I got a table of the privacy policies and the data sharing arrangement for Twitter pre-Musk and X post-Musk. Guess what? We're giving up more data across the board in every major category. We are handing over our data. And I've talked a lot about click wrap agreements and the fact that we've essentially gotten ourselves into this mess because we sign 150 to 400 click wrap agreements every year, and we've signed away our rights. We've signed away our data. Well, we doubled down on it with X. We've given him all of this on a silver platter. And now his AI company has just bought X. And there are still people, you post this today and you'll get nothing but hate. They haven't thought about it. They can't give you a counterpoint. They're just like, oh, well, how dare you question his intent? It's kind of like, how dare you not look at anything the guy has said in writing or in video? How dare you not look at any of the actual words or actions from this guy? And that's where we're stuck. Oh, I see. I am for I am. Let me see if he wants to join. I know he's late, but he could still pop in. So anyway, this stuff, but I actually suspect that because I'm talking about this stuff, this is why my traffic is down, because Elon changed the terms of service so that basically they can change the algorithm at will. And this happened, this change was made when the immigration argument came up and he didn't like what people had to say and he banned a whole bunch of people. Well, then he changed the terms and conditions. This guy is not for free speech. So I'm getting very frustrated about just how consistently people are willing to defend this. And now we've got people destroying Teslas, and then we have counter protesters. And the last thing I just saw is that the head of our AG is out there. We haven't done jack shit about the Epstein files, but she's going to crack down. And now all of a sudden you're a terrorist if you vandalize a Tesla. I mean, what a joke. These are the priorities. All of the stuff that's going on in this country and all of the corruption and the net effect of where we are is the DOJ is going to go after people that vandalize Tesla. Nice job, right? So anyway, I don't know. I didn't think we had I knew we didn't have a political shot before, but now I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to move, and the content that I'll be doing in these podcasts over the next couple of weeks will clearly show that I'm moving completely away from the political side of this. There was never any white knight, and the people that continue to believe it are they're lost. I mean, maybe they'll come around again, but RFK's not going to fix it. RFK's problem is that he believes in government. He believes that government can fix things. He'll sit there and say, well, we've got to go back to gold, standard science. There was never any gold standard science. There was no golden age of public health. That's the delusion. And even if there had been, we're in 2025. The idea that you need a centralized government-controlled public health apparatus makes no sense organizationally. If you were to design something from scratch to solve health problems, you would never in a million years come up with public health. You would never have anything like those institutions. So we're going backwards in all of these things. And all he's going to do is give more government control. And he's going to set a precedent, and people are going to support it because they like what he happens to say. But then when it's Fauci is the head of HHS next time, then we're all going to be mandated to eat bug paste, and it will all be because of the precedent that RFK set.
Yep. So since we're talking about psyops and government conspiracies and stuff, I was having a conversation about World War II earlier today. What do you think the chances are that the Empire of Japan crossed the whole entire ocean without one person seeing them, bombing Pearl Harbor, and then the United States of America had no idea that was happening? Now, back then, they had radar, they had nuclear weapons, they had it was pretty advanced technology back then. So when you bring this up with people, they stick to the official narrative like it's like a warm blanket, and they also defend the nuking of the two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, do we want to go into all sorts of psyops going back then and all the way to now with this technocracy? And like you said, Musk is not a free speech advocate. He's just looking to gather information and get us into Agenda 2045, right?
Yep. Well, sure. I mean, why not talk about it? I think that with FDR and with Pearl Harbor, I mean, I think it's been pretty much documented now that they had advanced warning well in advance that Pearl Harbor was going to happen, and that FDR had promised that we were not going to get into World War II, and he allowed it because it's the only way for him to have been able to politically get into the war after having said he didn't want to be in it. But he actually wanted to be in it. He just needed the excuse. So they basically let it happen. I mean, it's kind of like the October 7 thing in Israel, in my opinion. So I should see if this is probably already degraded from YouTube, but yeah, I mean, I think it's we know Vietnam. I mean, most of these things were false flags, and when you study it, and when you study the history of the CIA, I mean, you will find that that there's a lot of that a lot of this stuff was manufactured by law firms and particular business interests. That to them, war is just a business development opportunity. And that's always historically been the case with central banks as well. So, but it is hard to get people to accept. I mean, again, once you go down this rabbit hole, once you start questioning, this is why fasting is good. Find somebody on day 14 of a fast that isn't questioning, open to questioning all of this stuff. And then that's when you realize that pretty much everything has been a manufactured lie. And then it makes it easier for you to go about your day because you don't have to waste any energy having faith in any of these institutions or even trying to have faith. Because once you find out that it was rotten from the beginning, and once you then realize that something that started out like the FBI as having bad intent to begin with, and then having no accountability or feedback loop, it only is going to go in one direction. It's not like it's going to become higher integrity on its own in the shadows with no accountability. So these organizations have only gotten worse. So the problem is naively thinking that they were ever good or that you could correct them. But that's so far away. Like RFK isn't even there, right? RFK is like, I think he genuinely believes in the stuff that he's saying. And then other people genuinely believe it too. And I don't know what would convince him otherwise. Like I don't think RFK is maliciously doing the wrong thing. I just think that he's clueless.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like banning lots of things. The part of me, I understand. Like he thinks that this is going to work, but it doesn't seem like it's. Have you as far as Dr. Malone's mass formation psychosis when he came up with that whole thing during the whole COVID thing and the mask? Did you ever walk into a grocery store and you're the only one not wearing a mask, and then you get the looks from everybody, and like you're the only one actually not being retarded?
Yep.
So human nature tends to these psyops are so strong. I mean, they can get everyone to dress like clowns if they put it on the TV enough. If you're not dressed like a clown, you're the outsider. So with these psyops in the health industry and with Bitcoin, Roger wrote a book called Hijacking Bitcoin. That was where the whole banking industry overtaken, Bitcoin with Blockstream, and they didn't want to make the blocks bigger. Do we want to get into that right now too?
I mean, we can touch on it briefly. I'm going to do entire, episodes on that when I go into more detail on Roger's stuff. I'm sure I'll do at least one podcast just on hijacking Bitcoin. But I will tell you, just at a high level, I guess the problem that I have with this, like I look forward to being able to talk to Roger outside of the context of what he's dealing with, because I actually think he would be stunned. I've been to, again, all of these conventions, and I've spoken at all of these events, and you have too. You've been to a lot of these as well. Let me ask you this. So all these libertarian events, and some of these are like crypto events or whatever, are you seeing anybody talk about the use of cryptocurrency as peer-to-peer digital cash as a replacement for central bank money? Are you seeing anybody other than me who's talking about this?
The only person I remember talking about that was Ian Freeman. So he's in jail now. He used to talk about, you be your own bank, don't support your own oppressors and all that kind of stuff. As far as Bitcoin's concerned, I believe that if the blocks were bigger, or they adjusted the code and made it originally, a lot of the Bitcoin maxis feel as though the price would not be as high. I think it would be higher. Now, imagine if you had the original Bitcoin that wasn't manipulated with that blockchain, and it was actually the way it was supposed to be with privatization. How valuable would that really be?
Well, it's possible that the price wouldn't be. It's an interesting question. So the value of Bitcoin overall would be much, much more. The problem is that the only reason the price is up right now is because of the illusion of manufactured scarcity. So Bitcoin is about to have a crisis. And I just saw a tweet on this today. There's almost no transaction volume on Bitcoin. The blocks are not full. The actual transaction fees on Bitcoin today were 11 cents. And, I should be excited about that, except that 11 cents means that literally nobody is using Bitcoin. Here's the problem with that. Miners, the whole point of Bitcoin, the whole point of having block rewards was to give originally 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes to the miner that solved the problem first. And then every 4 years that gets cut in half. So 50, 25, 12 and a half, et cetera. And the reason that it goes down is that it was supposed to be a subsidy to get people and miners to secure the network up front, but with the understanding that the way that they would make money in the long run was by doing large, huge volumes of transactions. And when I say large and huge, like more than Visa, more than MasterCard. Satoshi said that. In fact, Satoshi said that was what it was supposed to be from the very beginning. Now we're in a situation where nobody's using it for transactions. And the only way miners can make money then, because they're not getting money on transaction fees, because think about it. You have a small block. They can only do 7 transactions per second. And now the fees are 11 cents. So you now have a situation where you have low volume and low fees. So the only way a miner cannot go broke is if the price keeps on going up. But the price isn't going to keep going up just for the sake of the price going up. Otherwise, what you literally have is a Ponzi scheme, because if no one's actually using it, and the only way the miners get money is not because they're processing large amounts of transactions, but because somebody else is paying more for the underlying block reward, that's a Ponzi scheme. So what's going to happen is at the next halving, unless there's some solution to this transaction, and the solution isn't that people will pay more for transactions, because there's a certain point at which the transaction fees on Bitcoin become more expensive than literally moving physical gold, right? So you can't just increase the fee. You can't just say, well, we'll keep the block small because people will then just pay more for the transaction fees. Literally, that's not how any technology works. Any technology as it scales gets less expensive to use. This is like a fundamentally known concept. And so you have a bunch of morons and technocrats that have not thought any of these aspects through. And so it's conceivable that the price might be temporarily higher because of this, but it's at the basically the failure of the entire system. But maybe the point of it wasn't for the Bitcoin itself to be that expensive. The point of it was to be a transaction network that did large volumes of transactions. So this is, and so now all of those people that are sitting around doing that, none of them are using peer-to-peer digital cash. And we're now at a point where the government is now stealing people's Bitcoin using civil asset forfeiture. And we're using tax. We have done nothing to stop central banks or governments. Nothing. None of what's going on right now is a solution to governments or central banks. And by the way, so somebody said today, so Elon Musk said, well, we should get rid of the Federal Reserve. And I talked about this in my last podcast. The Federal Reserve sucks and they're a useless third party. But you know what's worse? The government issuing the currency directly. Imagine this. Imagine Congress is releasing a digital currency where they can program, track, and censor it. At least right now, they would have to go through the Federal Reserve, and there's a layer. And the Federal Reserve doesn't necessarily have an incentive for programming and tracking everybody's money. In fact, all of the surveillance that happens with the money today, the NSA bulk data collection, the IRS surveillance, the Patriot Act, the Bank Secrecy Act, guess what? The Federal Reserve didn't pass that. The Federal Reserve didn't suggest that. The Federal Reserve didn't push that. All of the financial surveillance comes from Congress. So if you got rid of the Federal Reserve and you had the government directly issuing the currency, you'd actually have more surveillance. And this is not an argument for the Federal Reserve. This is an argument for the complete separation of money and state. That is what the argument is. The argument is I am not for the central bank or commercial banks as it's structured, given that they own the Federal Reserve in this network, and then Congress. The whole point was to get rid of all of that, to bypass all of that, and to have money people could use and exchange freely. This is how lost the plot is. And so people have traded their fiat gains and are now actively promoting a Ponzi. And so the problem is they're no longer the early adopters. They're actually now the enemy. The people that should be our allies are not. And so we have to now shift to, and again, this conference I was at, for health freedom, food freedom people, there are other categories of people that have not been involved in crypto at all, but that do understand being debanked. They do understand that government money sucks. So if we can make the tools easy enough for them to use so that you don't have to be techie to use the alternative currency, we're going to get more there than the entrenched retards that sold their souls for fiat currency. This panel I'm going to be on at Liberty Forum is going to be really interesting. And I'll tell you why, because the people on that panel, Joel is on our side on this. One of the guys, Keith Ammon, is a state rep. He authored the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill for New Hampshire. He was supposed to be on the panel. When he saw I was on the panel, he exited the panel. So we're in a situation where, 13 years ago at Liberty Forum is when everybody got, onboarded to Bitcoin because of Roger Ver. And now 13 years later, he's facing 109 years. Ian Freeman, who should certainly be at Liberty Forum and was at all of these events and who introduced Roger to Bitcoin, should be there. But he's in federal prison. But this entire fucking conference is people giving speeches about how great Bitcoin is and trying to sell people on a Bitcoin reserve. It's disgusting. It's actually disgusting. And, if I hope Roger's here, I hope Roger could make it to Liberty Forum. But the reason that we need Roger to be out of the predicament that he's in is so that he can help, reinvigorate people and reorient people to what this whole thing was about, because it is completely lost. Every one of these conferences, Anarchapulco, was another one. Was a weird conference, but there's no the vibe is not, oh, we're going to defeat central banks and we're going to spread freedom all over the world. The vibe is completely not that anymore. And so there's a little bit of it. I mean, there's a little bit of it but again, it is a minority view at that conference that we should be fully and aggressively pushing peer-to-peer digital cash and privacy. It's a minority view. I mean, Berwick is, of course, he's been a pro-privacy guy, but when you go around and you talk to people, man, I'm telling you, people are not looking, and a lot of people are complacent because they got into it for the separation of money and state. And now that they have fiat balance, now they're just disengaged. Now they're complacent. And so so when I asked you, because you've been at these conferences recently, I mean, your answer was, well, Ian Freeman was talking about it. No, I'm talking about any of the stuff we've been to, including the Libertarian National Party, the Libertarian National Convention. Have you been to a libertarian conference in the last year where people's primary concern for the use of cryptocurrency is as a protection against central banks and government tyranny? Have you been to any where that's the case, other than an event that I was holding?
No.
That is actually tragic. It is really, really tragic. But these people were they were all onboarded, or not all of them, but a lot of the OGs were onboarded by Roger. And this is the situation he's in. But when Bitcoin came out, right, it was a nice to have, because yes, it was coming after the financial collapse, but now if we aren't successful with cryptocurrency as peer-to-peer digital cash, then we get technocracy. Then we literally lose free will, because the good idea of Bitcoin will have been morphed into the surveillance form of it. And that's what we're going to get. So it's going to turn out to work completely against us. It's a complete 180. And it's frustrating, but to the point where I don't think spending time even on libertarian related stuff that's not even the best market segment for this. We've got to go where people are actually, that have been debanked and that actually have real interest in engaging in commerce and defeating tyranny, that have experienced the government oppression firsthand. That's our new early adopters. It's not libertarian people. Those people have actually become either a lost cause, or in some cases, actually the biggest enemy that we have. So again, I'll talk about some of this, how I lay this out. Part of it's going to be because of the fasting. I don't know what the topic, some of the topics I'll come up with based on I'll have an insight. I'll have some insight, and then it'll be a complete, might be a complete 180 on something. But like, people are pushing this guy Lowry, who wrote this book, Soft War, like this idea that, oh, well, nation states are going to use this. This is going to become the new form of warfare. I'm like, are you kidding me? So you're a libertarian and you're selling this as your use case. It's like, look in the mirror. You've lost entirely your way. So I don't know. I'm not pessimistic about the fact, I'll give you an example. I'm going to start showing people use cases. One use case that's interesting, because we've been talking a little bit about healthcare. And when people are so caught up, and this will come up with fasting too, right? Just like we talked about, big food is bullshit and 3 meals a day is bullshit and your doctor's bullshit. We're going to get into even like the idea of the insurance system itself. If you went to go pay cash for a procedure and you actually called about the cash price, you'll find often the cash price is less than your insurance copay. But then if you go to the next level and you start looking at medical tourism, you may find that the prices are as much as 98% less in a foreign country. I saw a clip of somebody in California who needed to get a root canal, and it was actually cheaper to fly to Thailand and spend a week in Thailand and get the procedure done than get it done through insurance in California. So, but people don't have that perspective. People's perspective is, oh, well, I've got to worry about, is this in network? Is it in my copay? I've got a job I don't like just so I could get insurance and pay a copay that's more than I would pay if I was paying cash out of pocket. Nobody understands how fundamentally broken the healthcare system is. So they're not even open to the idea of, oh, I've never thought about the idea I could go to a different country because they're charging me $40,000 for this medical procedure. You didn't realize, oh yeah, I could fly first class and stay at a 5-star hotel and actually get this done with equal or better quality in a foreign country. It never occurs to people to even think that way. So imagine now you have a marketplace. It's not Silk Road for, illegal drugs. It's global Silk Road for medical services, procedures, medications, anywhere globally. You want peptides? You can get peptides. You want this, you want that. You want to have open heart surgery. Here's how much it costs anywhere in the world. You can pay for it using cryptocurrency. You're not using billable insurance mechanisms. You can use Zano aliases so that the medical providers and people can earn reputation, but without having their individual identities necessarily trackable to financial transactions by third parties and by big pharma and by all the people that would want to shut down people from engaging in voluntary health-related transactions. I'm actually excited about that idea. I mean, and that's just one example of the kind of marketplace that you could create with Zano and using privacy coins. And that's how transformational it is. And so figuring out how to communicate how expansive and how important being able to interact voluntarily with people. Healthcare is all about suppression. There's nothing about healthcare that's free market. There's nothing about healthcare that's merit. And it's, it's hard to even educate people on how bad it is, but maybe it's just easier to build a open solution and then people will figure it out themselves. Because, if you're facing a life-threatening condition, then maybe you'll seek out different alternatives, and then this is a place to aggregate all that. But in any event, I know it's getting late. Thing's been going on for over 3 hours, so we should probably call it for today. Monday's maybe not a good day to do podcasts. I picked Thursdays for a reason. I actually asked AI what the best. There's Don. I think Don. I think we're gonna call it on this one. It's a little late, but we'll be back tomorrow at 8. So every day at 8 until this fast is over or Roger's out. One way or another, Roger's free. So any last thoughts?
Well, I was 2 more last thoughts. The American healthcare system costs a lot because you got to be able to afford your remdesivir and your ventilator for your common cold. And then number 2, thought about PorkFest. It'd be really cool to see Eric Clapton and Jordan Page put on a show with Roger there and a health freedom, Bitcoin, Zano, health freedom, PorkFest show, Clapton Page at the privacy tent at PorkFest, maybe on the main stage if Clapton's there. It's a little bit big for our bridges, but with Roger, anything could be possible. So Clapton is vaccinated too.
I don't think there's seating or electrical for that. I think we literally would have to pick a different venue unless he's willing to do it for 1,000 people. Which, hey, maybe, right? Maybe it's worth it, but I think that's going to be a bit of a tough one. So
definitely, it's good to fantasize sometimes, but it would have to be a much beefier AV system and everything else. But you could go cordless and do a whole show like that, and that might be kind of neat too.
That's true. Well, let's talk about that because I will do a podcast just on PorkFest. Roger and then PorkFest, which by the way are interrelated because I have some video clips of Roger from PorkFest in 2012. But we need to start scheduling now and everything. So this week we'll be doing a dedicated podcast on PorkFest. So hopefully you can come on for that and we can brainstorm ideas.
Definitely. There was good talking to you tonight. A great episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
All right. Awesome. I hope people share this one.
Definitely.
All right. Have a good night.
Take care, and have a good night.
Bye. You too.
They wanna give him 109 for following the legal line. Bitcoin Jesus paid his dues. Now they tryna make him lose. Free beer, can't silence the truth. Free beer, breaking their own rules. Free beer, from prison to Spain. Now they doing it again. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol. Government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead. Using compliance plans instead, yeah. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol. Government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead. Using compliance plans instead, yeah. Free beer. Free beer. Blockstream got the way back then. 1 meg blocks, remember when? Big blocks meant decentralized. Small blocks kept us paralyzed. Now they're coming for the king, using laws like puppet strings. Spanish prison, McAfee died, making sure Veer stays inside. They can raid the lawyers, what? They can seize the files, yeah. But they can't stop crypto, nah. Running wild, running wild. Brownstone dropping truth bombs daily. System going crazy lately. Trying to lock up Bitcoin Jesus, but they cannot defeat us. Fear saw freedom in the code. Now they wanna block his road, but the movement's too damn strong, and this persecution's wrong. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Down on 9 years for following legal advice. That's not justice, that's a warning. Free Roger Veer.